Welcome back, dear friend. Tonight we embark on a journey unlike any other. Tonight, we explore the entire story of the Greek gods, a story older than empires, older than kings, older than even the written word, a story of creation, of chaos, of love, of betrayal, of power, and of immortality. Long before there were cities, before there were temples, before mortals set foot on the earth, there was only the void, a yawning nothingness known as chaos. From chaos came the first primordial beings, the very foundations of existence. Gaia, the earth, rich and fertile. Tartarus, the dark abyss. Nyx, the mysterious goddess of night. Erebus, the embodiment of darkness. And Eros, the force of love and attraction that would bind the universe together. From Gaia, the earth itself, came Uranus, the sky, stretching above her in endless expanse. Together, Gaia and Uranus gave birth to the Titans, mighty beings of power beyond imagination. They brought forth children who would shape the cosmos, but also beings monstrous and terrifying, the Cyclopes, with their single, all-seeing eye, and the Hecatonchires, giants with 100 hands and 50 heads. Yet not all was peaceful. Uranus feared his children, and he cast the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires into the deepest pit of Tartarus. Gaia, heartbroken and furious at her husband's cruelty, forged a plan. From her came a great sickle of unbreakable adamant, and she called upon her children to rise against Uranus. Only one Titan answered, Chronos, the youngest, but the most daring. In a single, fateful strike, Chronos overthrew Uranus. From the blood spilled on the earth sprang the Furies, spirits of vengeance, the giants, and the ash tree nymphs. From the severed genitals cast into the sea, a goddess arose from foam, radiant and eternal. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire. With Uranus defeated, the reign of Chronos began. Yet even in the Golden Age, darkness lingered. Chronos, fearing a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, swallowed each of his offspring as they were born: Demeter, Hestia, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Only the youngest, Zeus, was saved by his mother Rhea, who hid him in a cave on Crete, replacing him with a stone to deceive Chronos. There, Zeus grew strong, nourished by a divine goat, and guarded by the Curetes, fierce warriors whose clashing shields drowned out his cries. When Zeus came of age, he returned to confront his father. With cunning and the help of the goddess Metis, he forced Chronos to regurgitate his swallowed siblings. United, they waged a war that shook the heavens and earth. The Titanomachy, mountains crumbled, seas boiled, and the sky roared with thunder as the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires joined the fight, forging weapons of unimaginable power. Zeus's thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, Hades's helm of darkness. The Titans were defeated, imprisoned deep in Tartarus, and the age of the Olympians began. Zeus became king of the gods, ruler of the sky. Poseidon lorded over the seas. Hades ruled the underworld, and the other gods took their places on Mount Olympus. Yet peace was never guaranteed, for the gods, though immortal, were deeply flawed. passionate, vengeful, loving, and capricious. Their stories would intertwine with mortals, heroes, and monsters, creating legends that endure to this day. Tonight, we will journey through every tale, every myth, every secret of the Greek gods, their births, their battles, their loves, and their rivalries. We will witness the rise of heroes, the fall of monsters, and the timeless stories that shaped human imagination. This is the entire saga of the Greek gods, and it begins now. Chapter 1. The Primordial Age. Before time, before the earth, before the sky, there was only chaos. But chaos was not chaos, as you might imagine. There was no noise, no war, no strife. There was simply the vast, empty void, silent and infinite. From this emptiness came the first beings, the primordial gods, who shaped the universe and laid the foundations for everything that was to come. First among them was Gaia, the earth. She was fertile, strong, and eternal, the mother of all life. She stretched wide and deep, and from her body sprung mountains, forests, rivers, and plains. She was the foundation, the bedrock of existence itself. Beside her, rising above her, was Uranus, the sky, vast and limitless, encasing the earth like a protective dome. And from their union, the first divine children came into being, the Titans, mighty beings of strength and wisdom, who would rule the cosmos before the Olympians. But Gaia did not exist alone. From the void, other primordial beings emerged. Tartarus, the abyss, a deep, dark pit beneath the earth where chaos gathered in tangible form. Nyx, the goddess of night, shrouding the world in mystery and shadow. Erebus, darkness itself, the companion of night. And Eros, the force of desire, the energy of attraction and creation that would bring life and motion to the universe. From them, the universe began to take shape. Gaia, the earth, soon bore Uranus, the sky, and they became consorts. Together, they gave birth to a generation of titans. Oceanus, the endless river encircling the world. Koios, the embodiment of intellect and the axis of the heavens. Kratos, the god of constellations. Hyperion, the god of light. Iapetus, the forebear of mortal heroes. Themis, goddess of divine law. Mnemosyne, the mother of memory. Chronos, the youngest, who would one day overthrow his father. And others, each destined to shape the cosmos in their own way. Yet not all children were gentle or fair. Gaia also bore the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants of immense strength, and the Hecatoncheires, monsters with 100 hands and 50 heads. Their power was unmatched, but Uranus feared them. Seeing only danger in their might, he cast the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires into Tartarus, imprisoning them in the deepest darkness. Gaia was furious. She loved all her children equally, and she could not bear the imprisonment of the mighty ones she had created. In her anger, she forged a great sickle of adamant, sharp, and unbreakable, and called upon her children to rise against their father. Yet only one dared to take action, Chronos, the youngest and most cunning of the Titans. When Uranus descended to lie with Gaia, Chronos struck. With the sickle, he overthrew his father severing him from the world. From the blood spilled upon the earth sprang the Furies, spirits of vengeance who would haunt wrongdoers for all time. From that same blood rose the giants and the ash tree nymphs, spirits of the forest. And from the severed genitals thrown into the sea, the goddess Aphrodite was born, emerging from the foam, radiant, beautiful, and eternal. She was the embodiment of love, desire, and irresistible beauty, and she would play a role in countless myths to come. With Uranus defeated, Chronos assumed the throne. A new age dawned, known as the Golden Age, where the Titans ruled. The earth was fertile, humanity was young, and the world knew peace. Yet even in this age, darkness lingered, for Cronus feared a prophecy that he would be overthrown by his own child, just as he had overthrown Uranus. In terror, Cronus took a terrible measure each time Rhea, his sister and wife, bore a child. He swallowed them whole. Demeter, Hestia, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, all trapped in his stomach, unseen by the world, yet alive. Rhea wept in despair, longing for the joy of motherhood and feared the loss of her children forever. When Zeus, the youngest, was born, Rhea called upon her mother, Gaia, for aid. Together, they devised a plan to save him. Rhea hid the infant in a secret cave on the island of Crete and gave Cronus a swaddled stone instead. Cronus, deceived, swallowed the stone, believing he had evaded fate. Meanwhile, Zeus was nourished by Amalthea, the divine goat, and protected by the Curetes, warriors who clashed their spears and shields to mask the cries of the infant god. Zeus would grow strong in secret, unaware at first of the destiny that awaited him. But the day would come when he would rise, confront his father, and set the stage for the next great age, the age of the Olympians. Though Cronus had seized the throne, the world was far from stable. The cosmos was alive, and every being, mortal, immortal, or divine, played a role in its unfolding. Gaia, despite her grief, continued to shape the earth. Mountains rose, rivers carved valleys, forests grew dense and deep. She created the first life upon her surface, from plants to animals, and she whispered to mortals yet unborn, teaching them survival, cunning, and respect for the earth. Even as Cronus ruled, the remnants of the primordial forces lingered. Nyx, the goddess of night, moved through the shadows, giving rise to dreams, sleep, death, and mystery. From her subtle power came Thanatos, the god of peaceful death, Hypnos, the god of sleep, Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, and the countless spirits who embody the dark and hidden aspects of life. Erebus, darkness itself, infused the world with the quiet inevitability of night, balancing the fiery chaos of the day with calm and rest. Eros, the god of love and desire, was perhaps the most unexpected of the primordial forces. From him came attraction, connection, and creation. It was Eros who bound the universe together, pulling beings toward one another, inspiring reproduction, love, passion, and even obsession. Without Eros, the gods and mortals alike would have remained isolated, unable to form the bonds that shape legends, families, and civilizations. Gaia and Uranus had not only birthed the Titans and the monstrous children, but they also set the stage for the concept of fate itself. The Fates, or Moirai, though not yet fully realized in this early age, began to emerge as subtle forces, weaving destiny in threads invisible to the gods themselves. Even Chronos, powerful though he was, could not escape the pattern of fate. The prophecy that he would be overthrown by his child hung over him like a shadow, an unyielding truth that would guide the course of history. The imprisoned Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, locked in Tartarus by Uranus, were not forgotten. Gaia, their mother, continued to whisper to them, urging patience, promising eventual freedom, and assuring them that justice would prevail. These beings, with their extraordinary strength, were destined to play a decisive role in the next great conflict, a reminder that even in the darkest prisons, power waits patiently for its moment. And so, the stage was set, a cosmos of divine and elemental forces, of light and darkness, of creation and destruction. The early age was one of potential, boundless, wild, and unpredictable. The universe itself was a living entity shaped by the ambitions, fears, and desires of its earliest gods. It was a world where the laws of order and chaos were constantly in tension, a world where love and strife, life and death, intertwined from the very beginning. Amidst all this, the prophecy of Kronos' downfall lingered like a silent drumbeat, a reminder that no power, no matter how absolute, could escape destiny, and thus the story of the Greek gods truly begins, with chaos giving birth to the cosmos, Gaia shaping the earth, Uranus ruling the skies, and Chronos rising to power, setting in motion a chain of events that would echo across eternity. In the next chapter, we will see how Chronos' reign unfolds, the golden age of the Titans, the birth of the first Olympians, and the dark shadow of fear that will eventually lead to his downfall. The primordial age was not just a time of creation, it was a time of shaping and defining the rules of existence itself. Gaia, Uranus, Nyx, Erebus, and Eros were not simply beings, they were forces, living principles that dictated the laws of the cosmos. Through them, the universe learned balance, day and night, light and darkness, life and death, creation and destruction. Gaia, ever nurturing, began to experiment with life upon her surface. She created towering forests, dense with trees whose roots dug deep into the fertile soil and whose branches reached high into the sky. Rivers flowed across the land, carving valleys and shaping mountains. Animals of all kinds appeared, beasts to roam the land, birds to fill the skies, and fish to navigate the waters. Gaia's creations were not merely forms. They carried the first sparks of vitality and instinct, gifts from their divine mother. Uranus, the sky, stretched above her, a protective and sometimes suffocating presence. While he ruled the heavens, he was also distant, a reminder that the gods of this age were both intimate with creation and detached observers of it. Yet his fear of his monstrous children, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, revealed a flaw even in primordial divinity, the inability to accept the unfamiliar, the the powerful, the extraordinary. This flaw would ripple through generations, a lesson for mortals and gods alike. Nyx, goddess of night, moved silently through the world, her presence unseen but undeniable. From her came sleep and dreams, the quiet places where the mind and soul could wander. She was the origin of mystery and fear, the keeper of secrets, and the mother of gods and spirits who personified what humans would one day call destiny, justice, and vengeance. Her children included Morpheus, the god of dreams, and Thanatos, the god of peaceful death. Through Nyx, the Greeks would come to understand that even life itself could not exist without darkness, that the unknown was as vital as the known. Erebus, darkness itself, intertwined with Nyx, creating the depth and shadow necessary for existence to feel real and full. He embodied the unseen forces of the universe, the space between stars, the quiet moments before action, the pause that gives meaning to movement. Together, Erebus and Nyx were the veil behind which life and death, action and consequence intertwined. And then there was Eros, the force of attraction, desire, and creation. Eros was not merely romantic love, as humans understand it. He was the energy that binds all things together. Through him, the stars were drawn to the sky, rivers flowed to the sea, and mortals and gods alike found themselves compelled toward one another. He was subtle, invisible, yet unstoppable, ensuring that the universe was not static, but ever moving, ever growing, ever changing. Amid these primordial beings, the Titans waited, a generation of gods born of Gaia and Uranus. They were vast in power and imagination, each embodying different aspects of existence. Oceanus, the endless river surrounding the earth, represented the flow of time and the eternal boundary of the world. Hyperion, the god of light, illuminated the universe, providing warmth and clarity. Coeus, the embodiment of intelligence, represented thought, inquiry, and cosmic reason. Krios, often associated with the constellations, mapped the heavens and gave order to the night sky. Themis, goddess of divine law and order, began the foundation of justice that would guide gods and mortals alike. Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, preserved the stories of the past, ensuring that the deeds of gods, monsters, and mortals could never be forgotten. And Chronos, youngest and most ambitious, would one day rise to challenge the very forces that gave him life. Yet the cosmos was not merely orderly, it was wild and untamed. The Cyclopes, with their single, all-seeing eye, represented the raw, unbridled power of creation. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands, embodied strength that could neither be ignored nor contained. Uranus, unable to comprehend their might, cast them into Tartarus, creating the first prison of the universe. But Gaia's whispers never ceased. She promised them freedom, telling them that one day the order of the cosmos would be challenged and that justice would prevail. Even in this age, the concept of fate began to take shape. Though invisible and intangible, the threads of destiny were already weaving through the lives of gods and mortals alike. The prophecy of Chronos's eventual downfall, the hidden future of Zeus, and the eventual rise of the Olympians were not accidents. They were preordained patterns in the fabric of existence, set in motion by the primordial forces. Thus, the primordial age was both the beginning and the blueprint. It was a time of immense creation, of cosmic experimentation, of a divine tension and promise. The universe learned balance, the gods learned ambition, and the stage was set for the first great conflict, the rise of Chronos, the golden age of the Titans, and the eventual emergence of the Olympian gods who would rule both heaven and earth. As the primordial age drew to a close, the cosmos had been shaped, ordered, and filled with life, yet tension lingered in every corner. Chronos, the youngest of the Titans, had grown strong and ambitious. Observing the patterns of his father, Uranus, he realized that power in the universe came not only from strength, but from cunning. And so, when the opportunity presented itself, he seized it. Cronus's overthrow of Uranus was a turning point, not merely for the gods, but for the universe itself. With the great sickle, he shattered the oppressive rule of the sky and claimed the throne. Yet in taking power, Cronus inherited not only the rule of the cosmos, but also the burdens of prophecy and fear. For Uranus had left a warning in his dying breath. One of Cronus's own children would one day rise against him, just as he had risen against his father. Consumed by fear, Cronus enacted a terrible plan. Every child born to him and Rhea would be swallowed whole. One by one, Demeter, Hestia, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon vanished into his stomach, trapped in darkness, yet still alive. The golden age of the Titans continued outwardly, a time of peace, abundance, and order. But behind closed doors, Rhea grieved. The joy of motherhood was stolen from her, replaced by despair and helplessness. Yet hope remained. When Rhea conceived her sixth child, Zeus, she would not allow Cronus to claim him. With the wisdom of Gaia, she devised a secret plan. When the child was born, she hid him away in a cave on the island of Crete. There, he was nourished by the divine goat Amalthea and guarded by the Curetes, fierce warriors whose clashing shields drowned out the infant's cries, ensuring that Cronus would never hear him. In Cronus's hands, a stone wrapped in swaddling cloth replaced the infant. Believing he had swallowed yet another child, Cronus remained unaware that Zeus had survived. And so, the universe held its breath. The prophecy lingered, but its fulfillment would wait for the right moment. The primordial age had ended, but the story of the cosmos was far from complete. From chaos emerged order. From the void came life. And from ambition and fear, the next chapter of divine history was poised to unfold. The golden age of the Titans, the rise of Zeus, and the epic battles that would define the heavens and earth were yet to come. Thus concludes the primordial age, a time of creation, of tension, of power, and promise. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the story of the Greek gods, with all its glory, tragedy, and adventure, was ready to begin in earnest. Chapter 2. The Rise of the Titans and Cronus's Reign. With Uranus overthrown, the Titans rose to power, and Cronus claimed the throne as the youngest and most cunning among them. The cosmos entered a new era, the Golden Age, a time of relative peace and abundance. The earth flourished under the Titan's rule. Crops grew plentifully, rivers flowed freely, and humanity, though still in its earliest form, lived without toil, war, or hardship. There was no suffering, no old age, and life itself seemed endless and unchanging. Cronus, however, ruled with both power and paranoia. Though he maintained the outward peace of the Golden Age, he was consumed by the prophecy that one of his own children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown Uranus. Fear became his guiding force, and with it came cruelty. Every child born to him, and Rhea was swallowed whole, vanishing into the darkness of his stomach. Demeter, the goddess of harvest and fertility, was the first to vanish, though she would eventually rise again. Her early years were spent trapped, a victim of her father's fear. Hestia, the quiet goddess of the hearth, followed, and then Hera, who would grow to become queen of Olympus and the goddess of marriage. Hades, lord of the underworld, and Poseidon, lord of the sea, were next. One by one, the children of Chronos disappeared, leaving Rhea in despair. Yet even as Chronos maintained his reign, not all was static. The Titans themselves, though loyal to their brother, were not immune to ambition and curiosity. Oceanus, the eternal river encircling the world, represented the flow of time, which even Cronus could not control. Hyperion, the god of light, brought clarity and understanding to the cosmos. Coeus, the embodiment of intellect, and Creus, the axis of the heavens, reminded the young king that wisdom and order must always temper power. Themis, goddess of law, watched carefully, ensuring that the fabric of justice remained intact, even under a tyrant. Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, preserved the stories of the time, recording both the triumphs and the fears of the Golden Age. Rhea, desperate to save her youngest child, turned to Gaia for guidance. Gaia, who had long mourned the fate of the monstrous children trapped in Tartarus, devised a plan that would protect Zeus, the child destined to fulfill the prophecy. When Zeus was born, she hid him in a cave on the island of Crete. The infant was nurtured by Amalthea, the divine goat, whose milk was said to grant strength and immortality. He was watched over by the Curetes, fierce warriors who clashed their spears and shields to mask the infant's cries, preventing Cronus from discovering him. In Cronus's hands, Rhea placed a stone wrapped in swaddling cloth. Believing he had swallowed yet another child, Cronus remained unaware of Zeus's survival, and so, for a time, the Golden Age continued, with the young Olympian god growing in secret, learning strength, cunning, and resilience. The Golden Age under Cronus was marked not only by abundance, but also by tension beneath the surface. The swallowed children, trapped within him, represented the potential for upheaval, a ticking time bomb within the very king who sought to control fate itself. Cronus's paranoia grew, yet it was his own actions that set the stage for the inevitable. The seeds of revolt, of war, and of cosmic change were already sown. Beyond the domestic realm of Rhea and Cronus, the universe itself was still alive with energy and conflict. Gaia continued to shape the earth, encouraging the growth of life. The imprisoned Cyclopes and Hecatonchires waited in Tartarus, their strength and fury untapped but ever present. Nyx and Erebus maintained the balance of night and darkness, ensuring that even in the Golden Age, the cosmos retained its mystery and unpredictability. Eros, ever present, wove bonds of attraction and desire, preparing the universe for the relationships and alliances that would define the next generation of gods. The Golden Age was a time of paradox, outward peace and inward tension, prosperity and fear, order and the latent chaos that would one day erupt. It was a time when the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when fate would assert itself. That moment would come with Zeus, the hidden child, whose destiny was intertwined with the very survival of the cosmos. Thus, the stage was set for the coming storm. Chronos's reign, though powerful, was fragile, built on fear and deception. The next chapter of the gods' story would be one of rebellion, war, and the birth of the Olympians, who would challenge the Titans and claim their place as rulers of heaven and earth. Even as Chronos ruled the cosmos, not all Titans were content to merely serve his whims. While some, like Rhea, nurtured life and sought peace, others began to chafe under the growing tyranny and paranoia of their youngest brother, Oceanus, who represented the endless flow of time, often contemplated the inevitability of change. He knew that no power, no matter how absolute, could last forever. Hyperion, the radiant god of light, watched the skies and saw omens in the stars, subtle signs that the reign of Chronos might not endure. Coeus and Crius, keepers of intellect and celestial order, whispered among themselves of destiny and the hidden threads that wove the future of gods and men. Chronos, however, was deaf to counsel. Each day, he ruled with an iron fist, ensuring the survival of the Golden Age, while simultaneously imprisoning his own children within his stomach. His fear was not unfounded, for the prophecy of Uranus lingered like a shadow over him. Yet it was precisely this fear, this desperate desire to control fate, that planted the seeds of his undoing. Rhea, aware that Chronos's paranoia threatened not only her children, but the future of the universe, took careful steps to subvert him. She hid her grief and nurtured hope, planning each birth with secrecy and cunning. Her first act of rebellion was subtle but decisive. The survival of Zeus. In the secret cave of Crete, Zeus grew rapidly, nourished by Amalthea, the divine goat, whose milk granted him extraordinary strength. The Curates, guardians of the hidden infant, danced, clashed their shields, and chanted, masking every sound. Zeus's early years were a time of training, of growth, and of preparation. He learned the strength of body, the clarity of mind, and the cunning necessary to confront a father who had swallowed his siblings. Meanwhile, Cronus continued to rule from Olympus, unaware of the growing threat beneath his feet. The earth thrived under his reign, and mortals, though few and primitive, lived in harmony with the land. Crops grew without toil, rivers flowed freely, and animals multiplied abundantly. Humanity, untouched by suffering or war, lived in a state of innocence, Yet the Golden Age was fragile. Beneath the surface, forces stirred. The imprisoned Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, though trapped in Tartarus, radiated power. Gaia, ever watchful, whispered to them, promising eventual freedom and vengeance against the tyrant who had imprisoned them. Even among the Titans, subtle unrest began to spread. Some sensed the inevitability of change, of rebellion, though none dared openly defy Chronos. They saw the hunger in his eyes, the fear that drove his cruelty, and they understood that the balance of power was precarious. Each day, the universe held its breath, waiting for the moment when destiny would intervene. As Zeus grew, so too did the tension between father and child, between ruler and ruled. Though hidden, Zeus's presence was already a threat, a spark in the darkness that would ignite the coming storm. Every act of kindness, every whisper of rebellion, every heartbeat in that hidden cave was a step toward the end of Kronos' reign. The Golden Age, though abundant, was thus a time of paradox. Life and fertility coexisted with fear and secrecy. Power was maintained through paranoia, and peace was built on deception. The stage was set, the players in position, and the universe waited. The next chapter, the inevitable confrontation, was drawing near, a conflict that would shake the heavens, tear the earth, and define the future of gods and mortals alike. As the Golden Age continued, Kronos' fear and paranoia only deepened. Each day, he imagined the prophecy inching closer to fulfillment, though he remained unaware that the one destined to overthrow him was alive and growing in secret. Rhea, seeing her children's captivity and the tyrant's unrelenting grip, knew that she alone must act to change the course of fate. Her courage and cunning became the quiet force that would eventually overturn the reign of Chronos. When Zeus was born, Rhea took careful steps to ensure his survival. The infant god was hidden in a secret cave on Crete, nourished by Amalthea, the divine goat whose milk was said to bestow not only life, but extraordinary strength. The Curetes, fierce warriors, danced and clashed their weapons, masking every cry and ensuring Chronos would never discover the hidden infant. The infant, Zeus grew rapidly, strong beyond his years, his mind sharp, his body already carrying the promise of a future ruler who would challenge even the mightiest of titans. Meanwhile, Chronos, deceived by Rhea's clever plan, swallowed a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, believing it to be the child. For a time, he continued to rule, maintaining the outward peace of the Golden Age, yet inside, a storm was quietly building. The imprisoned Olympians, Demeter, Hestia, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, waited, trapped within Chronos, their power and potential growing silently, bound by the very force of their father's fear. The years passed, and Zeus matured, learning the arts of strength, strategy, and cunning. Under Gaia's guidance, he discovered the ways of the universe, the secrets of the earth, and the hidden powers that even Chronos could not control. He learned patience, knowing that the time to strike would come, that fate itself had aligned him for a purpose far greater than survival. Then came the moment of cunning and rebellion. Guided by Gaia, Zeus returned to confront Chronos. In one version of the myth, he forced the Titan to vomit, aided by a potion or a cunning trick that caused Cronus to disgorge the swallowed children. One by one, they emerged from their dark prison. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, each restored to their full divine form. The reunion was not only emotional, but also a restoration of balance, for the hidden Olympians represented the forces necessary to challenge Cronus's rule. Together, Zeus and his siblings prepared for the inevitable confrontation with the Titans, a war that would shake the heavens and the earth. The Golden Age under Cronus, though prosperous, had sown the seeds of its own destruction. The hunger for power, the fear of fate, and the desire to maintain control had created a tension that could no longer be contained. The rise of Zeus marked the end of Cronus's uncontested reign and the beginning of the era of the Olympians. It was a turning point, not just for the gods, but for the entire cosmos. From the shadows of the cave on Crete, a new generation of divine rulers emerged, stronger, wiser, and ready to claim their place on Mount Olympus. Thus concludes chapters 2, The Rise of the Titans and the Reign of Chronos. The Golden Age had come to an end, replaced by the promise of rebellion, war, and the birth of a new order. The next chapter, the Titanomachy, would chronicle the epic war between the Olympians and the Titans, the forging of legendary weapons, the unleashing of primordial powers, and the ultimate rise of Zeus as king of the gods. Chapter 3, the Titanomachy. With Cronos's reign nearing its end, the universe stood at the brink of war. The Olympians, freed from the darkness of Cronos's stomach, now stood united with Zeus at their head. But they were not yet invincible. The Titans, powerful and ancient, still ruled from Olympus and the far reaches of the cosmos, their strength unmatched, their fury immense. The stage was set for the greatest conflict the universe had ever known, the Titanomachy, the war between the old gods and the new. Zeus, now fully grown and aware of his destiny, took command of his siblings. Poseidon, lord of the seas, his trident shimmering with divine energy, stood ready to challenge the oceans themselves. Hades, lord of the underworld, cloaked in shadows, prepared to command the forces of death and the unseen realms. Hera, queenly and formidable, lent her wisdom and strategic insight. Demeter, radiant with the power of harvest and fertility, could manipulate the earth itself. Hestia, though peaceful by nature, offered her presence as a stabilizing force. Yet even united, the Olympians faced near impossible odds. The Titans were colossal, ancient, and experienced in war. Chronos, their leader, wielded the immense power of the first generation of gods. Oceanus commanded the eternal rivers. Hyperion illuminated the battlefield with blinding light. Coeus and Crius orchestrated the cosmos with intellect and strategy. And Iapetus, forefather of men, lent his strength to the Titans' ranks. The very heavens seemed to shudder under the anticipation of the coming battle. The war raged for 10 long years, a cosmic conflict that shook the foundations of the universe. Mountains crumbled under the Titan's strikes. Oceans boiled as Poseidon's trident met Oceanus's might, and the sky crackled with the thunder of Zeus's bolts. The hecaton Kyres, freed by Zeus, unleashed their 100 hands in overwhelming fury, hurling massive boulders and striking down titans with unstoppable force. The Cyclopes, once imprisoned by Uranus, forged weapons of unimaginable power for the Olympians. Zeus's thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, and Hades's helm of darkness, each imbued with elemental energy that could rival even the Titans themselves. The battlefield stretched across the cosmos, from the peaks of Olympus to the depths of Tartarus. The skies burned with lightning, the seas roared with Poseidon's wrath, and the earth trembled beneath the steps of gods and monsters. Titans and Olympians clashed in epic combat, their strikes echoing through eternity. The very air was alive with magic, power, and fury. Chronos himself was a formidable opponent, wielding both raw strength and centuries of experience. Yet Zeus, guided by strategy, courage, and the support of his siblings, began to turn the tide. Using cunning and the newly forged weapons, Zeus struck powerful blows against the Titans. Poseidon's trident split the oceans and tore through the ranks of their enemies. Hades, unseen, struck from the shadows, using the helm of darkness to terrify and confuse. One by one, the Titans fell. Oceanus, despite his eternal rivers, could not withstand the coordinated assault. Hyperion, the god of light, was blinded by Zeus's thunderbolts. Coeus and Crius, masters of strategy, found themselves outmaneuvered. Chronos, realizing that his time had come, was finally overpowered by the combined might of the Olympians. With the Titans defeated, Zeus and his siblings bound them and cast them into the depths of Tartarus, a prison reinforced with chains forged by the Cyclopes and guarded by the hecaton Kyres. The Titans, once rulers of the cosmos, were imprisoned, their power diminished, and their era brought to an end. The Olympians, triumphant, claimed Olympus as their domain, marking the dawn of a new age, the age of Zeus, king of the gods. Yet the victory came with lessons and costs. The universe had been reshaped by war. The bonds between gods and mortals would be influenced by the memory of this conflict. The Olympians, though victorious, now carried the weight of responsibility, for they were not only rulers, but custodians of the cosmos. The golden age of the Titans had ended, replaced by a new order, where strategy, wisdom, and divine law would guide the universe. Thus concludes the initial stage of the Titanomachy, the overthrow of the Titans, the triumph of Zeus and the Olympians, and the establishment of a new divine order. But the story does not end here. Even in victory, the Olympians would face challenges, conflicts, and rivalries that would shape the myths for generations to come. With the Titans defeated and imprisoned in Tartarus, the Olympians began to consolidate their power over the cosmos. Zeus, now firmly established as king of the gods, recognized that victory alone was not enough. The universe required order, balance, and guidance. Each Olympian claimed their dominion. Poseidon ruled the seas, Hades the underworld. Hera became queen and guardian of marriage. Demeter nurtured the earth and harvest, and Hestia presided over the sacred hearths of gods and mortals alike. Yet the war had left scars. Some titans, though imprisoned, retained their influence over the world. Oceanus, Hyperion, and others had touched the rivers, the skies, and the light in ways that even Zeus could not fully erase. It became clear that the Olympians' reign would require vigilance, cunning, and the establishment of divine laws to prevent chaos from returning. It was during this time that Prometheus, the Titan who had sided with Zeus, began to shape humanity. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, saw that mortals were fragile, vulnerable, and in need of guidance. He taught them the arts of civilization, fire, craftsmanship, agriculture, and strategy. He endowed them with intellect, creativity, and the ability to shape the world around them. Yet this gift angered Zeus, for fire was sacred to the gods, a symbol of power and divine authority. Prometheus defied Zeus, giving fire to humanity, and in doing so, set the stage for a conflict between gods and mortals that would echo through eternity. Zeus, enraged by the Titan's disobedience, devised punishments both for Prometheus and for humanity. Prometheus himself was bound to a mountain where an eagle would eat his liver daily, only for it to regenerate each night, an eternal torment for his audacity. Humanity, meanwhile, would face hardships, mortality, and suffering, but also the capacity for innovation, heroism, and greatness. The punishment of the Titans and the rebellion of Prometheus were more than acts of vengeance. They were a demonstration of the rules of the new order. Zeus had established that the Olympians would govern with power, wisdom, and the authority of divine law. Those who defied the natural order, even among the gods, would face consequences. As Olympus settled into its new reign, the relationships between gods, titans, and mortals began to shape. Mortals worshipped the Olympians, building temples, offering sacrifices, and telling stories of their deeds. Heroes would arise, inspired by both the guidance and the caprice of the gods. Conflicts between gods and humans, rivalries among deities, and alliances between mortals and divine beings became central to the unfolding myths of the Greek world. Even within Olympus, tensions simmered. Zeus, though king, faced challenges from within his own family. Hera, his sister and queen, wielded influence with cunning and determination, often clashing with Zeus over matters of loyalty, marriage, and morality. Poseidon, though loyal, could be unpredictable, his moods reflected in storms and earthquakes. Hades, ruler of the underworld, remained distant yet ever watchful, ensuring that the balance of life and death remained intact. The Titanomachy, then, was not merely a war, it was a transformation. It marked the shift from the age of primordial chaos and Titan rule to the structured, powerful, and often turbulent reign of the Olympians. It set the precedent for divine hierarchy, cosmic justice, and the complex interactions between gods, mortals, and the forces of the universe. Even as the Olympians celebrated victory, the universe remained alive with potential, conflict, and destiny. Titans might have been imprisoned, but their influence lingered. Prometheus had challenged the authority of the gods, reminding all that intelligence and courage could shape the course of history, and humanity newly empowered with fire and knowledge, was poised to enter the stage of myth, where heroes, monsters, and divine intervention would define the stories that continue to captivate the imagination to this day. Thus concludes the central events of the Titanomachy, the battle, the imprisonment of the Titans, the rise of Zeus as king of the gods, and the initial interactions between mortals and divinity. The age of the Olympians had begun, but their reign would be filled with love, betrayal, war, and adventure, stories that would unfold across countless generations, shaping myths that endure even now. Chapter 4: The Rule of Zeus with the Titans. Defeated and imprisoned in Tartarus, Zeus stood at the pinnacle of divine power. He was no longer the hidden child of Rhea, protected in a secret cave on Crete. He was the king of the gods, ruler of the sky, wielder of the thunderbolt, and arbiter of justice and order in a cosmos that had seen chaos, rebellion, and war. Yet, ruling Olympus was no simple task. Though the Titans were bound, the universe was vast, full of ancient forces, lingering resentments, and unpredictable mortals. Zeus's reign would be defined not just by victory, but by the delicate balance of power, law, and the often capricious nature of the gods themselves. Zeus claimed dominion over the sky, the heavens, and the clouds, shaping the weather, the storms, and the natural order. He appointed Poseidon to rule the seas, granting him the trident and authority over oceans, rivers, and all creatures of water. Hades was given the underworld, a realm of shadows, death, and hidden secrets, where he would preside over the souls of the departed and the treasures buried within the earth. Demeter nurtured the earth, ensuring the fertility of crops and the abundance of harvests, while Hestia presided over the hearths of gods and mortals, embodying stability and sacred home fires. Hera, as queen of Olympus, exercised influence over marriage, family, and divine diplomacy, often serving as both ally and rival to Zeus in matters of governance. Despite their shared victory, the Olympians were far from a harmonious family. Tensions simmered beneath the surface. Hera, often jealous of Zeus's numerous affairs and children, plotted subtle schemes that would ripple through both divine and mortal worlds. Poseidon, though loyal, could be tempestuous, punishing mortals or rival gods when angered. Hades, ever watchful, remained distant, yet vigilant, his realm a reminder that death and destiny were forces even Zeus could not entirely control. Zeus's rule was also marked by his interactions with humanity. Mortals, newly empowered by Prometheus with fire and knowledge, became the subjects of Zeus's judgment and guidance. He watched over kings and heroes, rewarding piety and punishing hubris. He sent omens, storms, and divine interventions to shape the fate of cities and civilizations. From the earliest kings to wandering heroes, humans were bound to the whims and wisdom of the Olympian gods. Yet even as Zeus established order, challenges arose. The Titans, though imprisoned, remained a looming threat. Their ancient power, coupled with lingering resentment, meant that the new king of the gods could never be complacent. Gaia, the earth herself, still whispered subtly to the imprisoned Titans, reminding them of the potential for escape, rebellion, or subtle influence upon the mortal world. The balance of Olympus was delicate, requiring both strength and cunning from Zeus. Among the earliest tests of his rule were disputes with the other gods and goddesses. Athena, born fully armed from Zeus's forehead, became a symbol of wisdom and strategic warfare. Her counsel often sought in matters of governance and war. Apollo and Artemis, children of Zeus and Leto, represented light, prophecy, and the hunt, each wielding influence over both mortals and immortals. Hermes, the clever messenger, navigated the complexities of Olympus, relaying messages, forging alliances, and occasionally stirring mischief. But Zeus's reign was not only about diplomacy and administration, it was also defined by love, desire, and the countless liaisons that produced demigods, heroes, and future legends. Many myths tell of Zeus's affairs, his children with mortals, nymphs, and goddesses alike. Each union, each offspring, had a role to play in the ongoing drama of the universe. Some would become heroes, like Heracles and Perseus. Others would inspire conflict, jealousy, and vengeance among gods and mortals alike. The rule of Zeus, then, was multifaceted. He was a warrior, a judge, a father, a lover, and a ruler. His thunderbolt was both weapon and symbol, a reminder that even the greatest power could be tempered by wisdom, and that order in the cosmos depended on vigilance, foresight, and the ability to wield both strength and mercy. Thus, the reign of Zeus marked a new era in the history of the gods. The Titans were imprisoned, the Olympians ascended, and the mortal world became intertwined with divine power. Yet, even as Olympus flourished, tensions, rivalries, and the unpredictable whims of gods and humans alike ensured that the stories of this era would be filled with drama, conflict, and wonder. Even after the Titanomachy, Zeus's reign was far from peaceful. The Olympians had secured their rule over the cosmos, but the world still required order, guidance, and justice. One of the first great challenges Zeus faced came from Prometheus, the Titan who had sided with him during the war, yet now defied him for the sake of humanity. Prometheus had gifted mortals fire, a tool of creation, innovation, and survival. With it, humanity could cook their food, forge weapons, and create tools. They could light their homes and warm their hearths. Yet Zeus, furious that mortals possessed such a divine gift, sought to punish both Prometheus and humanity. In his wrath, Zeus bound Prometheus to a remote mountain, chaining him with unbreakable chains while a great eagle, sent by Zeus himself, tormented the Titan daily, consuming his liver, which regenerated each night. This punishment, eternal yet symbolic, reminded both gods and mortals of the consequences of defying divine authority. Prometheus's rebellion, however, also cemented his role as humanity's protector. Mortals, grateful for his gifts, learned to honor both the gods and the Titan who had shown them foresight. Through Prometheus, humanity gained not only fire, but also courage, intelligence, and the spark of ingenuity that would define the heroes and civilizations to come. Another consequence of the Titanomachy was the fate of Atlas, the Titan who had fought against the Olympians. Zeus condemned Atlas to bear the weight of the heavens upon his shoulders, a punishment that symbolized both strength and burden. Atlas stood at the edges of the world, holding the sky aloft, a living reminder of the consequences of defying the new order. Yet, even in punishment, Atlas's endurance and power were admired, for he carried a burden that no other being could withstand, a testament to the might of the Titans, even in defeat. As Zeus established his rule, the Olympians turned their attention to shaping the world and overseeing mortals. They built Olympus, a majestic palace above the clouds, a realm of splendor where the gods could live in power, luxury, and relative harmony. Golden halls, radiant gardens, and fountains of divine water adorned the mountaintop. Here, the gods would hold councils, deliberate on divine justice, and oversee the fate of mortals below. The architecture and beauty of Olympus reflected the might and majesty of its rulers, yet it also became a stage for the dramas, rivalries, and intrigues that would define the Olympian age. Zeus's reign was also defined by his many interactions with mortals, often testing them, rewarding them, or punishing them for hubris. Heroes arose during this time, guided or hindered by divine intervention. Perseus, who would slay Medusa and rescue Andromeda. Heracles, destined for unmatched strength and heroic feats. And countless other demigods and mortals navigated the influence of the gods. Their fates intertwined with Olympus. Even among the Olympians, tensions were constant. Hera, jealous and cunning, often challenged Zeus's authority, especially regarding his infidelities and the children he fathered with mortals. Poseidon's temper caused earthquakes and storms that affected both gods and mortals. Athena, wise and strategic, sometimes clashed with her father's impulsive decisions, offering counsel that was not always heeded. Apollo, god of the sun and prophecy, and Artemis, goddess of the hunt, pursued their own missions, shaping the mortal world with precision and power. Zeus also had to maintain order among the lingering Titans, ensuring that none could escape Tartarus or disrupt the new hierarchy. Even defeated, the memory and influence of the Titans were potent, and Zeus's vigilance became a defining characteristic of his rule. He balanced authority with diplomacy, might with wisdom, and punishment with mercy, recognizing that the universe required a ruler who could wield power responsibly. Thus, the early years of Zeus's reign were a time of consolidation, challenge, and transformation. Olympus became the center of divine power. Mortals began to rise as heroes and civilizations, and the legacy of the Titanomachy shaped every corner of the cosmos. Zeus's rule was not only about victory, but about ensuring that order, law, and justice endured in a universe that had once teetered on the brink of chaos. Even as Zeus solidified his rule, threats to Olympus continued to emerge. Among the most terrifying was Typhon, a monstrous being born of Gaia in response to the imprisonment of the Titans. Typhon was unlike any creature the world had ever seen, a storm of chaos and destruction, with 100 serpent heads, immense wings, and eyes that burned like fire. His roar shook the heavens, and his massive body stretched from the earth to the skies, threatening to unseat Zeus and plunge the cosmos back into chaos. The battle with Typhon was one of the greatest conflicts in Greek mythology. Zeus wielded his thunderbolts with unmatched precision, hurling them with divine fury to strike down the monstrous being. The battle raged across the heavens and the earth, lightning and fire clashing against Typhon's fury. Even the other Olympians joined the fight. Poseidon lashed out with tidal waves. Athena strategized to exploit Typhon's weaknesses, and Hermes darted swiftly, relaying messages and coordinating attacks. After an epic struggle, Zeus triumphed, hurling Typhon beneath the earth, where he remained trapped beneath Mount Etna, his fury said to erupt as volcanic eruptions. This victory not only secured Olympus, but reinforced Zeus's role as the supreme arbiter of order and power. Beyond battles with monsters, Zeus's reign was marked by his numerous affairs and the birth of demigods, each of whom would shape human history and legend. Zeus fathered heroes such as Heracles, Perseus, Helen of Troy, and many others. Each offspring brought both blessings and challenges. While some, like Heracles, achieved incredible feats of strength and heroism, others caused strife among mortals and gods alike, fueling jealousy, conflict, and intrigue. Hera, in particular, often sought to punish the offspring of Zeus's affairs, leading to countless tales of trials, vengeance, and divine rivalry. Zeus also maintained a complex web of relationships with his fellow Olympians. Athena, born fully armed from his head, became a close advisor and symbol of wisdom, yet she could challenge his decisions. Apollo and Artemis, twin deities of light and the hunt, pursued their own agendas while serving Zeus's broader vision. Hermes, god of travelers, thieves, and communication, often acted as a mediator, messenger, or trickster, influencing events among gods and mortals alike. Even Hades and Poseidon, though loyal in war, sometimes disagreed with Zeus on matters of justice, punishment, and governance. Mortals remained a constant focus of Zeus's attention. He rewarded piety, punished hubris, and intervened in human affairs to maintain balance. From sending floods and storms to inspiring heroes with visions, Zeus's influence was omnipresent. The story of Deucalion and Pyrrha, survivors of the great flood sent by Zeus to punish humanity for its corruption, illustrates his willingness to reshape the mortal world when it strayed too far from divine law. Yet, even in punishment, Zeus often left hope, allowing humans to rebuild, learn, and flourish under the guidance of the gods. The early reign of Zeus, then, was a mixture of triumph and challenge. He established Olympus as the center of divine power, forged order from the chaos left by the Titans, and intervened directly in both mortal and divine affairs. Yet threats persisted. Monsters like Typhon, rebellious Titans, ambitious mortals, and the intricate rivalries among the Olympians ensured that no moment was free from tension or intrigue. Through these struggles, Zeus's character emerged fully, a ruler of unmatched power, a strategist of divine wisdom, a father to heroes, and a force of order in a universe still echoing with the chaos of its primordial past. His reign set the template for the interactions between gods and humans, the balance of power on Olympus, and the enduring myths that continue to captivate the imagination even today. Zeus's reign over Olympus was not merely a time of cosmic order. It was an era of constant interaction with the mortal world. He watched over kingdoms, cities, and villages, often intervening directly in human affairs. Mortals who showed piety, courage, or wisdom were rewarded with blessings, prosperity, and divine favor. Those who displayed hubris, arrogance, or defiance faced punishment, sometimes subtle, sometimes catastrophic. His judgments shaped the course of history, teaching humanity the importance of reverence for the gods. One of Zeus's earliest interventions was the story of Lycaon, a king who tested Zeus by serving him human flesh. In his fury, Zeus destroyed Lycaon's kingdom with a thunderbolt, turning the king into a wolf, a punishment that symbolized both divine wrath and the consequences of moral corruption. This act sent a clear message to mortals. The gods were ever watchful, and defiance would not go unpunished. Yet Zeus's relationship with mortals was not purely punitive. Heroes arose under his guidance or through his direct influence. Perseus, armed with divine gifts, would slay Medusa and save Andromeda. Heracles, the strongest of mortals, would endure unimaginable trials, including the famous 12 labors, each orchestrated by fate and the gods. Helen of Troy, another of Zeus's offspring, would ignite the Trojan War, demonstrating how the actions of mortals, guided by divine intervention, could reshape history. Through these heroes, Zeus left an indelible mark on the mortal world, blending guidance with the unpredictability of human choice. Zeus's reign was also marked by a perpetual rivalry with Hera, his sister and queen of Olympus. Hera, deeply jealous of Zeus's numerous affairs and offspring, often plotted against his lovers and their children. Her cunning and influence extended across Olympus, and her schemes frequently caused chaos for both gods and mortals. Yet their relationship was not purely adversarial. Hera also acted as Zeus's partner in governance, helping maintain divine law, advising on matters of justice, and ensuring that Olympus functioned as a coherent realm. Their dynamic, marked by conflict, loyalty, and occasional reconciliation, became a defining feature of Olympian politics. In addition to internal rivalries, Zeus maintained the order of the universe by addressing lingering threats from the Titans and other primordial forces. While the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, their influence persisted subtly. Gaia, the earth, continued to whisper to them, reminding Zeus that vigilance was necessary to prevent rebellion or disruption. Meanwhile, creatures like Typhon, though defeated, remained a latent threat, their power contained but not entirely erased. Zeus's role as king required constant attention to both immediate and potential dangers. The children of Zeus played a central role in his rule, bridging the gap between mortals and gods. Athena, born fully armed from Zeus's forehead, became a symbol of wisdom, strategy, and justice. She guided heroes in battle, advised rulers, and helped shape cities like Athens, where her patronage would ensure prosperity and cultural advancement. Apollo, god of the sun, prophecy, and music, influenced mortals through art, inspiration, and guidance, while his twin sister, Artemis, goddess of the hunt and protector of the wild, maintained balance between civilization and nature. Hermes, the clever messenger and trickster, facilitated communication between gods and mortals, ensuring that the divine will reach those who needed it. Even Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, contributed to the order of Olympus by forging weapons, tools, and artifacts that shaped the destiny of both gods and heroes. Through these children, Zeus's reign extended beyond mere rule. It became a complex interplay of guidance, intervention, and influence, shaping both divine and mortal realms. Thus, the reign of Zeus in its early years was defined by the consolidation of power, the triumph over monsters and titans, the intricate rivalries among gods, and the fostering of mortals and heroes. Olympus flourished under his leadership, yet the world remained a dynamic and unpredictable place, shaped by divine will, human ambition, and the lingering echoes of primordial chaos. Zeus's rule, therefore, was not static. It was a living, breathing era of mythology where every act of power, every intervention, and every rivalry contributed to the tapestry of the universe. The stories of mortals, heroes, and gods intertwined, forming the foundation of the myths that would endure through time, shaping not only the ancient world, but the imagination of generations to come. Zeus's reign over Olympus was filled with both grandeur and controversy, particularly because of his numerous relationships with mortals, goddesses, and nymphs. Each liaison left an indelible mark on the world, producing children who would become legendary heroes or infamous figures in myth. One of the most famous was Europa, a Phoenician princess whom Zeus abducted in the form of a magnificent white bull. He carried her across the sea to Crete, where she became the mother of Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon, rulers and judges whose names would echo through history. Another mortal, touched by Zeus's desire, was Io, a priestess of Hera. Zeus fell in love with her, and to hide her from Hera's wrath, he transformed her into a white heifer. Yet Hera's vigilance was relentless, and she sent a gadfly to torment Io as she wandered the earth. This tale not only illustrates Zeus's power and passion, but also the constant interplay of jealousy, cunning, and divine influence that defined Olympus. Leda, another mortal woman, bore children of both mortal and divine heritage after Zeus visited her in the form of a swan. From this union came Helen of Troy, whose beauty would later ignite the Trojan War, and Castor and Pollux, twins who became renowned as the Dioscuri, patrons of sailors and warriors. Through these stories, Zeus shaped both the mortal and divine worlds, intertwining the fates of men and gods in ways that would reverberate for generations. But Zeus's interventions were not always acts of love. They could also serve as lessons or punishments. The story of Arachne, a mortal weaver who dared challenge Athena in skill, demonstrates this. Arachne's pride and hubris led her to be transformed into a spider, destined to weave eternally. While Athena delivered the punishment, Zeus's presence as king underscored the enforcement of divine order, the idea that mortals who overstepped their bounds would face consequences. Similarly, Niobe, who boasted of her superiority to the goddess Leto, lost her children to Apollo and Artemis as a result of divine retribution, a reminder of the peril of arrogance in the eyes of Olympus. Even the mortal world cities and civilizations bore Zeus's influence. He guided kings, inspired the founding of cities, and oversaw the establishment of temples and sacred spaces. Athens, Delphi, Olympia, and other important centers of worship reflected not only the devotion of mortals, but also the enduring power of Zeus and his divine family. Temples were built, sacrifices offered, and festivals celebrated in honor of the gods, particularly Zeus, whose authority as king ensured that these rituals maintained the bond between Olympus and humanity. Yet even as Zeus shaped the mortal realm, tensions among the Olympians continued to simmer. Hera, vigilant and often vengeful, sought to undermine Zeus's lovers and children, while Athena, Apollo, and Artemis pursued their own divine missions. Poseidon's temper created storms that impacted mortals and gods alike, and Hades, though withdrawn in the underworld, occasionally influenced events through the fate of souls. Olympus, though orderly, was never without intrigue, conflict, or rivalry, a living, dynamic realm where power, wisdom, and cunning were constantly tested. The rule of Zeus, therefore, was not simply about might, it was about balance. He wielded the thunderbolt to enforce justice, guided heroes to greatness, punished hubris, and fostered civilization. His actions shaped the destinies of gods and mortals alike, weaving together a tapestry of myth that combined divine authority, human ambition, and the unpredictable interplay between the two. Thus, the early years of Zeus's rule, filled with battles, interventions, divine liaisons, and the establishment of Olympus as the center of cosmic order, set the stage for the enduring age of the Olympians, from the triumph over the Titans to the guidance of mortals, from the punishment of rebellious beings to the birth of legendary heroes. Zeus established his authority and shaped the mythic world in ways that would echo forever. The early years of Zeus's reign had been defined by triumph, challenge, and the careful balancing of power, from the overthrow of Chronos and the Titans to the punishment of Prometheus, the subjugation of Typhon, and the shaping of mortal civilizations. Zeus had proven himself a ruler, both mighty and wise. Yet his reign was far from simple. Rivalries, jealousies, and divine politics constantly tested him, even as he sought to maintain order across Olympus and the mortal world. Zeus's children, both divine and mortal, became instruments of his influence, shaping cities, wars, and legends. Heroes like Heracles and Perseus emerged under his guidance, their feats intertwining human ambition with divine power. Athena, Apollo, Artemis, and Hermes extended his reach, ensuring that knowledge, strategy, prophecy, and communication served both gods and mortals alike. Poseidon and Hades maintained the seas and the underworld, reinforcing the order that Zeus had fought to establish. Yet even with the triumphs of battle and governance, Zeus learned that rulership required more than strength. He had to navigate jealousy, ambition, and defiance, not only among mortals, but among his own family. Hera's constant scrutiny, Hera's plots against his lovers and children, and the ever-present threat of Titan rebellion demanded vigilance, patience, and cunning. Zeus's authority was absolute, but it was also fragile, requiring diplomacy, strategy, and the occasional show of overwhelming power. The early era of Zeus's reign also established key principles of Olympus: the enforcement of justice, the reward of piety, the punishment of hubris, and the delicate balance between divine intervention and mortal free will. Mortals learned to honor the gods through sacrifice, ritual, and reverence, understanding that the favor of Olympus could bring both prosperity and peril. Heroes arose, civilizations grew, and myths began to intertwine human experience with divine influence, creating the rich tapestry of Greek storytelling that would endure for centuries. Finally, Zeus's reign reminded both gods and mortals that power alone was insufficient. A ruler had to be wise, just, and vigilant, able to enforce order while inspiring loyalty, to punish without destroying, and to guide without dominating. The triumphs, challenges, and stories of this era set the foundation for the age of the Olympians, a time when divine influence would shape human destiny, legendary adventures would unfold, and the eternal drama between gods, mortals, and the forces of the universe would continue to evolve. Thus, the first chapter of Olympus under Zeus came to a close. The Titans were vanquished, Olympus was secured, heroes had begun to rise, and the mortal world had felt the indelible influence of divine power. The reign of Zeus had begun in earnest, setting the stage for the complex interplay of gods and humans, love and jealousy, war and wisdom, that would define the golden age of the Olympians. Chapter 5: The Olympians and the Expansion of Divine Influence. With Zeus firmly established as king, the Olympians began to expand their influence across both the divine and mortal realms. Olympus had become a majestic center of power, a palace of gold, marble, and divine light perched high above. The clouds, here, the gods lived in splendor, but their actions reached far beyond the mountain, shaping the destiny of humanity and the natural world alike. Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and warfare, became the patron of cities and civilization. She taught humans arts, governance, and military strategy, guiding them toward progress and prosperity. Her most famous contribution was to Athens, where her wisdom inspired laws, culture, and intellectual pursuits. Athena reminded both gods and mortals that strength alone was not enough. Wisdom, foresight, and planning were equally powerful forces in shaping destiny. Apollo, god of the sun, prophecy, music, and healing, extended the influence of Olympus through inspiration and foresight. He granted mortals insight into the future through oracles, most famously at Delphi, and inspired art, music, and medicine. His twin sister Artemis, goddess of the hunt, protected the natural world and ensured the balance between civilization and wilderness, overseeing the survival of animals and the protection of the young. Poseidon, though loyal to Zeus, wielded his power over the seas with a temper that mortals and gods alike respected. Sailors prayed to him for safe passage, and cities offered sacrifices to avoid storms or earthquakes. His power served as a reminder that even in a world governed by order, the forces of nature could not be tamed entirely. Hades, meanwhile, ruled the underworld with unyielding authority, ensuring that death and the afterlife followed strict rules. Souls were judged, buried treasures guarded, and the cycle of life and death maintained a delicate balance. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, taught humans the cycles of agriculture, the importance of fertility, and the rhythms of nature. Under her influence, crops flourished, seasons followed predictable patterns, and humanity learned to honor the earth through rituals and gratitude. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, represented stability, family, and the sacred flame, ensuring that the bond between home, community, and divine favor remained strong. Even as the Olympians shaped human civilization, rivalries and conflicts continued among the gods themselves. Hera, ever vigilant, often opposed Zeus's affairs, punishing mortals and demigods alike when her jealousy was provoked. Athena, Apollo, Artemis, and Hermes acted according to their own domains and interests, sometimes supporting Zeus, and other times asserting independence. Poseidon's temper caused storms and earthquakes that reminded mortals and gods of the fragile balance of power. Hades remained watchful in the underworld, influencing events from the shadows. The gods' interactions with mortals led to the creation of heroes, legends, and epic tales. Perseus, Heracles, Theseus, and countless others arose under divine influence, their actions demonstrating the interplay between human ambition and divine guidance. Mortals learned to navigate both favor and wrath, understanding that their lives were entwined with the whims and wisdom of the gods. Temples, sacrifices, and festivals became central to human culture, honoring Olympus and reinforcing the bond between mortals and immortals. Through their collective influence, the Olympians expanded their presence across the cosmos. They inspired civilization, enforced divine law, and ensured that the world remained balanced between order and chaos. Even as remnants of the Titans lingered and the primordial forces of the universe persisted, the Olympians' reign established a new age, one of myth, legend, and divine influence that would shape humanity for centuries to come. Among Zeus's most famous interactions with mortals was the story of Europa, a Phoenician princess whose beauty captured the attention of the king of the gods. Zeus transformed himself into a magnificent white bull and approached Europa, who, captivated by the gentle creature, climbed onto his back. Swiftly, he carried her across the sea to the island of Crete, where she became the mother of Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon. These sons would grow to be great rulers and judges, their wisdom and justice shaping civilizations and immortalizing their lineage. Another mortal touched by Zeus's desire was Io, a priestess of Hera. Zeus fell in love with her, and to protect her from Hera's wrath, he transformed her into a white heifer. But Hera, ever vigilant, sent a gadfly to torment Io causing her to wander the earth in anguish. Io's journey took her across continents, and her suffering eventually led to the birth of descendants who would play pivotal roles in human history, reminding mortals that divine actions could be both cruel and providential. Leda, another mortal woman, was seduced by Zeus in the form of a swan. From this union came children of great renown, Helen of Troy, whose beauty would ignite the Trojan War, and the twins Castor and Pollux, known as the Dioscuri, who became protectors of sailors and patrons of bravery. Through these children, Zeus intertwined mortal destiny with divine will, ensuring that human history would be forever shaped by the actions of gods. Zeus's interventions were not always born of desire or affection. Sometimes they were lessons in humility or morality. Arachne, a mortal weaver, dared to challenge Athena in skill. Her pride and hubris led the goddess to transform her into a spider, destined to weave eternally. This story emphasized the consequences of overstepping divine boundaries while illustrating the Olympians' role in maintaining cosmic balance. Similarly, Niobe, who boasted of her superiority to Leto, lost all her children to Apollo and Artemis, punished for her arrogance, yet remembered as a cautionary tale of pride before the gods. Even mortal civilizations felt the Olympians' influence. On a grand scale, cities were founded and shaped under divine guidance. Athens, Delphi, Olympia, and other sacred centers were not merely cultural hubs, they were living monuments to the gods' authority. Temples, festivals, and sacred games honored the gods, while priests and oracles mediated between Olympus and humanity. Mortals learned the importance of piety, ritual, and obedience, while the gods ensured that human progress remained intertwined with divine oversight. Heroes continued to rise under the Olympians' guidance. Perseus, armed with divine gifts, would slay Medusa and rescue Andromeda. Heracles, the son of Zeus, endured the 12 labors, each a test of strength, courage, and morality. These stories demonstrated the dynamic relationship between gods and mortals. Humans were capable of greatness, but their achievements were often shaped, challenged, or sanctioned by divine power. Even the natural world was touched by the Olympians. Poseidon's seas, Demeter's fertile lands, Artemis's wilderness, and Apollo's light ensured that the world reflected the order and influence of Olympus. Storms, harvests, earthquakes, and sunlight became tools through which gods communicated, punished, or rewarded, teaching mortals to respect and honor forces beyond their control. Through these myths and interventions, the Olympians expanded their influence far beyond the walls of Olympus. They shaped human history, guided civilizations, punished hubris, and inspired heroism. Their presence was constant, their power absolute, and their stories a reminder that mortal lives were forever intertwined with the whims, wisdom, and desires of the gods. Not all interactions between gods and mortals were acts of love or favor. Many were contests, tests, and punishments designed to enforce respect for Olympus and its laws. The story of King Midas illustrates the dangers of greed and hubris. Midas, granted a wish by Dionysus, asked that everything he touched turn to gold. At first, he rejoiced. imagining immense wealth. But soon he realized the curse of his desire. Food, drink, and even his own daughter turned to lifeless gold. Only through humility and supplication to the gods was Midas freed, a tale that reminded mortals that divine gifts could carry both blessing and burden. Another famous example is Arachne, the mortal weaver who dared to challenge Athena herself. Her skill was unmatched, yet her pride led her to claim superiority over a goddess. Athena accepted the challenge, but when Arachne's arrogance persisted, transformed her into a spider, condemning her to weave eternally. This tale, like many, reinforced the lessons of humility, respect for the divine, and the consequences of overstepping mortal bounds. The Olympians also held contests among themselves, shaping the mortal world in unexpected ways. The rivalry between Athena and Poseidon over the patronage of Athens is a prime example. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, producing a saltwater spring, while Athena offered the olive tree, symbolizing peace, prosperity, and wisdom. The citizens chose Athena's gift, and thus the city was named in her honor. This contest demonstrates how divine rivalries influenced mortal decisions, institutions, and the development of civilization itself. Zeus, as king, often mediated these contests, ensuring that power and authority were respected. His interventions reminded both gods and mortals that order and justice were central to Olympus. The establishment of sacred laws, moral codes, and ritual practices reinforced the bond between humanity and the divine. Temples, sacrifices, and festivals became essential parts of daily life, allowing mortals to honor the gods while seeking guidance, protection, and favor. Mortals were also tested through direct divine punishment. Niobe, who boasted of her superiority to Leto, saw her children slain by Apollo and Artemis, and she herself was turned to stone. Sisyphus, a cunning king who sought to cheat death, was condemned to eternally roll a boulder uphill, only for it to roll back down each time, symbolizing the futility of defying divine law. These tales, among countless others, reinforced the principles of justice, humility, and reverence for the Olympians. At the same time, the gods inspired heroism, courage, and creativity. Heroes such as Heracles, Perseus, and Theseus arose not only through mortal effort, but through divine gifts and guidance. Athena provided wisdom and strategy, Hermes offered tools and advice, Apollo inspired courage and skill, and Zeus occasionally intervened to ensure the hero's destiny unfolded as planned. These interactions emphasized that mortal achievement was intertwined with divine influence, blending free will with the guiding hand of Olympus. Even natural phenomena reflected the Olympians' presence. Storms, earthquakes, floods, and droughts were reminders of Poseidon's power. Fertility, harvests, and seasons fell under Demeter's care. The sunlight, oracular visions, and music of Apollo inspired awe and devotion. Artemis protected the wilderness and ensured balance between civilization and nature. In every corner of the world, the Olympians' influence was felt, teaching mortals the importance of piety, respect, and understanding their place in the cosmos. Through contests, punishments, guidance, and inspiration. The Olympians expanded their influence far beyond Olympus itself. They shaped laws, molded civilizations, and created the conditions for human heroism and moral growth. Mortals learned that life was a balance between divine will and personal choice, that wisdom, courage, and respect for the gods were essential, and that the stories of Olympus were not merely myths, but lessons in living, striving, and understanding the universe. The Olympians' influence over mortals was perhaps most dramatically expressed through the birth of demigods, children of both gods and humans. These half-divine heroes were bridges between Olympus and the mortal world, carrying divine gifts and inheriting extraordinary abilities. Heracles, son of Zeus, and the mortal Alcmene embodied strength, courage, and resilience. His 12 labors, imposed by King Eurystheus but guided by divine will, became legendary tests of morality, perseverance, and ingenuity. Each labor, slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the Erymanthian boar, obtaining the girdle of Hippolyta, was both a physical feat and a moral lesson, illustrating the balance of mortal effort and divine intervention. Perseus, another son of Zeus, was similarly shaped by divine influence. Tasked with slaying Medusa, he received guidance and gifts from several Olympians. Athena provided a reflective shield, Hermes a winged sandal, and Hades' helmet of invisibility aided him in stealth. Perseus's triumph not only saved Andromeda from a monstrous sea creature, but also demonstrated how mortals could rise to greatness when aided by divine wisdom, courage, and cunning. These demigods served as examples to humanity, showing that the favor of the gods could elevate mortals to extraordinary achievements. Not all divine interactions were blessings, however. Olympians frequently punished mortals whose actions challenged divine authority or offended the gods. The story of Deucalion and Pyrrha recounts Zeus's attempt to cleanse humanity after it had become corrupt. He sent a great flood to destroy all but the most virtuous humans. Deucalion and Pyrrha, guided by divine wisdom, survived and repopulated the earth, casting stones over their shoulders that transformed into men and women. This tale emphasized the gods' role as moral arbiters, capable of destruction, yet willing to reward the righteous and preserve hope. Similarly, entire peoples sometimes suffered divine punishment. The citizens of Thebes, for example, were struck with plagues, curses, or famines when they angered the gods, illustrating that collective hubris or disrespect could provoke the wrath of Olympus. Mortals learned that their actions were not isolated. They were part of a web of cause and consequence that the Olympians governed meticulously. The Olympians also inspired cultural and technological progress in humans. Athena's gifts of weaving, law, and strategy, Demeter's knowledge of agriculture, and Apollo's inspiration in music, prophecy, and medicine encouraged civilizations to flourish. By guiding human creativity, skill, and morality, the gods ensured that mortals could thrive while remaining connected to divine influence. Temples, oracles, and festivals became places where humans could honor the gods, seek guidance, and align themselves with the order of Olympus. Divine contests continued to shape the world as well. Beyond the famous Athena-Poseidon contest for Athens, other rivalries, both subtle and direct, drove innovation, heroism, and moral lessons. When gods competed, mortals often became the beneficiaries or victims, demonstrating that divine power extended far beyond the confines of Olympus, influencing everything from cities to agriculture to personal destiny. Through these interventions, Olympus became deeply intertwined with human history. Mortals learned to navigate the favor and wrath of the gods, striving for heroism, piety, and wisdom. Heroes emerged, civilizations grew, and morality was tested in ways both grand and personal. The Olympians' actions established enduring patterns: courage, ingenuity, respect for divine law, and recognition of human limitations. Thus, the expansion of Olympian influence marked a golden age of mythology. Zeus's consolidation of power, the guidance of Athena, Apollo, and Artemis, the protection of Poseidon and Hades, and the nurturing of Demeter and Hestia created a cosmos where gods and mortals were inextricably linked. The stories of divine punishment, heroic trials, and mortal achievement became the foundation for centuries of myth, legend, and cultural memory, setting the stage for the next great chapter in the history of Olympus. The Olympians, under Zeus's leadership, had established a universe in which divine power and mortal ambition were forever intertwined. Through contests, blessings, and punishments, the gods taught humanity lessons about courage, humility, piety, and wisdom. Heroes like Heracles, Perseus, and Theseus demonstrated the heights mortals could reach with divine favor, while figures like Niobe, King Midas, and Arachne illustrated the consequences of hubris, greed, or disrespect. Temples rose across Greece, oracles spoke prophecies, and festivals celebrated the Olympians' influence, reinforcing the bond between humans and gods. The natural world itself became a canvas for divine power. Storms from Poseidon, fertile harvests from Demeter, the sun's light from Apollo, and the guidance of Athena in battle or governance reminded mortals of the omnipresent influence of Olympus. Even death and the underworld, ruled by Hades, were part of this intricate divine system, teaching that every life was part of a greater cosmic order. Meanwhile, the Olympians' own rivalries, alliances, and interventions created endless stories of intrigue, heroism, and morality. Hera's vigilance ensured accountability. Athena's wisdom guided progress. Apollo and Artemis shaped culture and morality, and Hermes connected the mortal and divine realms with speed and cunning. These interactions demonstrated that Olympus was a living, dynamic society, not a static pantheon, where gods learned, acted, and sometimes clashed just as mortals did. By the end of this era, humanity had learned to respect the power of the gods, to strive for greatness, and to understand the delicate balance between ambition and humility. Olympus had expanded its influence beyond the mountains of Greece, embedding itself in every aspect of mortal life: governance, warfare, agriculture, art, and morality. The age of heroes was born, and the stories of gods and mortals would be told for centuries, shaping culture, imagination, and morality alike. Thus, Chapter 5 closes with a universe transformed. The Olympians had established order, inspired human achievement, punished transgression, and set in motion the epic dramas that would define Greek mythology. Mortals and demigods now lived in a world shaped by divine intervention, where courage, wisdom, and respect for the gods determined both legacy and destiny. Olympus was no longer merely a home for gods. It was the center of a moral and cultural universe, a realm where myths were born and immortalized, and where the interplay between mortals and immortals would continue to echo through the ages. Chapter 6: The Age of Heroes, and the Olympians' continuing influence, with Olympus firmly established and the mortal world shaped by divine guidance. A new era emerged, the Age of Heroes. This was a time when the actions of mortals carried extraordinary consequences, when courage, ingenuity, and morality were tested, and when the Olympians actively shaped human destiny. Heroes were no longer ordinary men or women. They were the living bridges between Olympus and the mortal world, often born of divine parentage, endowed with gifts, and tasked with monumental challenges. One of the earliest and most famous heroes was Heracles, son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene. His life was defined by both extraordinary feats and relentless trials. From his very birth, Heracles faced divine scrutiny. Hera's jealousy led her to attempt his death as an infant, sending snakes into his crib. Yet even in infancy, Heracles displayed his divine strength, strangling the snakes effortlessly. This early episode set the tone for a life defined by both struggle and triumph, a life where mortal courage and divine influence intertwined. The 12 labors of Heracles remain among the most enduring tales of heroism. Each labor tested not only his physical strength, but also his moral character and perseverance. He faced the invulnerable Nemean lion, whose impenetrable hide could not be pierced by any weapon. He captured the Erymanthian boar, cleansed the Augean stables with ingenuity, and confronted the multi-headed Lernaean hydra, whose regenerative heads threatened to overwhelm him. Each challenge demonstrated the delicate balance between mortal effort and divine guidance, as gods like Athena, Hermes, and even Zeus provided advice, tools, or protection. Meanwhile, Perseus, another son of Zeus, embarked on quests that combined courage, cunning, and divine favor. Tasked with slaying Medusa, the Gorgon, whose gaze turned men to stone, Perseus received gifts from the gods: Athena's reflective shield, Hermes' winged sandals, and Hades' helm of invisibility. Using these tools with intelligence and bravery, he defeated Medusa, rescuing Andromeda from a sea monster in the process. Perseus's story illustrates how the Olympians shaped human destiny, guiding heroes to greatness while testing their ingenuity and moral judgment. Heroes were not always divine offspring. Theseus, the legendary king of Athens, demonstrated how mortal courage and wisdom could achieve extraordinary feats, navigating the labyrinth to defeat the Minotaur. Theseus relied on intelligence, strategy, and the aid of Ariadne's thread. His actions protected countless Athenians from sacrifice and cemented his status as a hero favored by the gods. Theseus's story, like those of Heracles and Perseus, exemplifies the Olympians' enduring involvement in human affairs. Mortals could achieve greatness, but divine influence was often the invisible hand guiding their path. The Olympians also shaped epic wars and conflicts that defined human history. Mortals, inspired or provoked by the gods, became agents in larger cosmic narratives. The Trojan War, though centuries later, is a prime example of divine influence. Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite each guided, rewarded, or punished mortals based on their desires and rivalries, demonstrating that human conflict was inseparable from the will and whims of Olympus. Heroes like Achilles, Hector, and Odysseus rose to prominence under divine influence, their fates intertwined with the plans of gods and the moral lessons embedded in their actions, even in everyday mortal life. The Olympians' presence was constant. Farmers honored Demeter to ensure fertile harvests. Sailors prayed to Poseidon for safe passage. Families sought Hera's favor for marriage and childbirth. Communities consulted oracles, built temples, and held festivals in honor of the gods, embedding divine influence in every aspect of human culture. Mortals learned that the favor of Olympus could elevate them to greatness, while disrespect, arrogance, or impiety could lead to ruin. Thus, the Age of Heroes was a period of constant interaction between mortals and Olympians. Courage, wisdom, and morality were tested. Divine favor could elevate ordinary humans to legendary status, while disobedience or hubris brought swift consequences. Heroes became the living proof of Olympus's influence, demonstrating that human destiny was inseparable from divine power. The Age of Heroes was also defined by quests that tested courage, morality, and ingenuity. One of the most iconic tales is that of Jason and the Argonauts. Jason, a mortal prince, was tasked with retrieving the Golden Fleece, a symbol of kingship and divine favor. The journey was fraught with dangers. Harpies, clashing rocks, and monstrous guardians threatened the crew at every turn. Yet the gods guided Jason at critical moments. Hera, in particular, favored him, providing wisdom, protection, and subtle interventions. Athena's strategic advice helped him navigate impossible challenges, while Aphrodite orchestrated love and alliances that ensured success. The story of Jason demonstrates the Olympians' intricate involvement in mortal affairs, where success depended on both human courage and divine guidance. Atalanta, the famed huntress, provides another example of heroism shaped by divine influence. Blessed with extraordinary speed and skill by Artemis, she became a formidable force among mortals, participating in the Caledonian boar hunt and challenging suitors to races that determined their fates. Atalanta's life illustrates how the gods could empower mortals, granting them gifts that set them apart, while also weaving moral lessons into their stories. Courage, loyalty, and cleverness were rewarded, while pride and recklessness often led to downfall. The Olympians also directly influenced warfare and conflict among mortals. The Trojan War remains the most famous example, a monumental clash of mortal ambition and divine will. Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite became deeply involved due to the fateful judgment of Paris, a mortal prince tasked with deciding which goddess was the fairest. Each goddess offered bribes and favors, power, wealth, and love, setting in motion a conflict that would engulf generations. Heroes like Achilles, son of the sea nymph Thetis, were molded by divine parentage and guidance. Achilles' near invincibility, his rage, and his moral choices reflected both human flaws and the shaping hand of the gods. Hector, Prince of Troy, similarly stood as a mortal hero whose courage and sense of duty were tested by divine influence, illustrating the constant interplay of human and divine forces. Even the journeys of mortals were shaped by divine intervention. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, faced a decade-long voyage home from Troy, encountering monsters, temptresses, and divine trials. Athena, in particular, guided him with wisdom and cunning, while Poseidon's wrath constantly impeded him. The epic of the Odyssey reflects the duality of the Olympians' role. They were both helpers and obstacles, shaping human destiny while testing endurance, intelligence, and moral fortitude. Divine punishments continued alongside heroism. Mortals who defied the god's will or exhibited arrogance often suffered severe consequences. Niobe, boasting of her superiority over Leto, lost all her children to Apollo and Artemis, while Sisyphus, who attempted to cheat death, was condemned to eternally roll a boulder uphill. Even entire cities faced divine wrath. Plagues, floods, or famine reminded humans that Olympus demanded respect, humility, and piety. These lessons were embedded into the very fabric of Greek culture, ensuring that morality, courage, and reverence were central to human life. Yet despite these punishments, the Olympians also inspired growth, progress, and civilization. Athena's wisdom-shaped governance and law. Demeter's guidance ensured agricultural abundance. Apollo's light and music inspired art, healing, and prophecy. Heroes became cultural symbols, embodying ideals of bravery, cleverness, and virtue. Their stories, intertwined with divine will, became the moral and cultural backbone of Greek society. Thus, the Age of Heroes was an era defined by the delicate balance of mortal ambition and divine influence. Success, failure, life, and death were shaped by the Olympians, whose power ensured that human deeds were never isolated from cosmic order. Mortals learned courage, wisdom, and humility. Heroes rose to legendary status, and the interplay between Olympus and Earth created a tapestry of myth that would endure through the ages. The Age of Heroes also saw the rise of figures whose lives intertwined with both mortal ambition and divine influence, shaping the political and cultural landscape of Greece. Bellerophon, for instance, was a mortal hero favored by Athena and Poseidon, tasked with defeating the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster terrorizing Lycia. Bellerophon received the divine gift of Pegasus, the winged horse, which enabled him to confront the beast from the air. His triumph demonstrated that mortal courage, combined with divine assistance, could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Yet even Bellerophon's story carries a warning. His later attempt to reach Olympus on Pegasus resulted in his fall, punished for hubris and ambition beyond mortal bounds. Oedipus, another tragic hero, illustrates the inexorable power of fate intertwined with divine will. Though not the child of a god, his destiny was shaped by the prophecies of Apollo. Despite his best efforts to avoid fulfilling the oracle's prediction, Oedipus inadvertently killed his father and married his mother, bringing ruin to Thebes. His story underscores the Olympians' control over human destiny and the moral lessons embedded in Greek myth. Wisdom, self-awareness, and humility were essential for navigating life. Yet even the most virtuous mortals could be subject to forces beyond their control. The gods' influence extended to entire kingdoms and cities. Thebes and Athens, among others, were shaped by divine intervention, guidance, and sometimes punishment. In Athens, Athena's wisdom ensured the growth of culture, strategy, and governance, while in Thebes, divine wrath, jealousy, or prophecy often led to calamity. The founding of cities, establishment of laws, and creation of sacred rituals were all influenced by the Olympians, who sought to align human society with divine principles. Mortals learned that respect for the gods, adherence to ritual, and cultivation of virtue were not optional, but essential to the survival and prosperity of their communities. Even heroic families faced trials shaped by Olympus. The house of Atreus, including Agamemnon and Menelaus, became central to the story of the Trojan War. Divine favor and wrath influenced their fortunes, testing loyalty, courage, and moral judgment. The fates of these kings and their families demonstrated that human actions were rarely isolated. They reverberated across generations, intertwined with the desires, rivalries, and interventions of the gods. Divine punishment remained a central theme in the Age of Heroes. Mortals who acted with arrogance, disrespect, or cruelty often faced immediate consequences. The tale of Hippolytus, a devout follower of Artemis, demonstrates this. His stepmother, Phaedra, falsely accused him of seduction, and Poseidon, responding to her prayers, and a chain of misunderstandings, sent a sea monster that caused Hippolytus's death. Even innocence could not always protect mortals from the complex web of divine influence, illustrating the nuanced and often unpredictable nature of Olympus's power. Yet the Olympians also inspired moral growth, cultural achievement, and personal heroism. Athena's guidance fostered law, strategy, and intellectual achievement. Demeter's influence taught mortals agriculture, the cycles of life, and reverence for the earth. Apollo's light, music, and prophecy inspired creativity, healing, and moral insight. Heroes became living symbols of these lessons, showing that greatness was attainable, but only through courage, wisdom, and respect for the divine. Through the Age of Heroes, the Olympians created a world where mortal and divine destinies were inseparably intertwined. Mortals learned the value of bravery, cleverness, and humility. Kingdoms and cities flourished under divine guidance, and the tapestry of myth expanded, incorporating lessons of morality, fate, and human potential. The stories of this age became enduring symbols of the interaction between gods and humans, shaping culture, law, and imagination for generations to come. One way this shift manifested was through the continued education of humanity via myth and story. Tales of divine punishment, such as the fates of Tantalus, Sisyphus, and Lycaon, served as cautionary lessons, warning mortals of the dangers of arrogance, impiety, and hubris. Similarly, stories of triumph, like those of Heracles, Perseus, and Odysseus, exemplified the rewards of courage, intelligence, and moral integrity. Myths became tools for teaching ethics, instilling cultural values, and guiding human behavior long after the gods had stopped walking openly among mortals. The Olympians also influenced the development of civilization in ways that extended beyond individual acts. Athena's wisdom laid the foundations of governance, law, and strategy. Apollo's inspiration shaped art, music, medicine, and oracular practice. Demeter's guidance ensured agricultural stability and respect for the natural cycles, and Hermes encouraged trade, communication, and innovation. Even in their absence from direct action, the gods' domains continued to shape human society, demonstrating that Olympus was not merely a physical presence, but a moral and cultural framework embedded in the world itself. Festivals, temples, and rituals became central to preserving this divine influence. The Olympic Games, the Eleusinian Mysteries, and countless local celebrations honored the gods while reinforcing lessons of fairness, courage, and piety. Mortals learned that the divine could be honored not only through grand quests or heroic feats, but also through daily acts of devotion, ethical conduct, and communal participation. This democratization of divine influence allowed humans to internalize Olympus's moral and cultural framework, ensuring its endurance across generations. The Olympians' legacy also endured in literature, philosophy, and cultural imagination. Poets, playwrights, and historians wove their tales into the fabric of Greek identity. Hesiod, Homer, and later tragedians like Sophocles and Euripides preserved the stories of gods, heroes, and moral lessons, allowing successive generations to learn from the triumphs and failures of both mortals and immortals. Even when belief in direct divine intervention waned, the myths of Olympus continued to shape thought, values, and cultural identity, demonstrating that the gods' influence transcended time and human perception. Through this transformation, the Olympians achieved a form of immortality beyond their divine lifespans. Their lessons became embedded in the moral consciousness of humanity, guiding civilizations long after their active intervention ceased. Courage, wisdom, humility, and reverence for higher powers remained central virtues, while the stories of heroism, divine punishment, and human ingenuity continued to inspire, instruct, and captivate. Thus, the later myths of Olympus illustrate a profound shift from direct intervention to enduring influence. The gods' power became less about physical acts and more about moral guidance, cultural shaping, and the preservation of cosmic and ethical order. Mortals no longer relied on gods to solve their problems, but were guided by the principles the Olympians had established. Learning to navigate life with courage, wisdom, and virtue. Chapter 7 closes with the understanding that the Olympians' legacy was timeless. Even as the age of heroes faded into history, the moral, cultural, and intellectual frameworks created by Olympus continued to shape human civilization. Mortals were reminded that while they may act independently, their choices, courage, and virtue were forever measured against the enduring lessons of the gods. Olympus was no longer just a realm of immortals, it had become the foundation of human understanding, morality, and imagination, a guiding force that would echo through all generations. Chapter 8, From Myth to Philosophy, the enduring legacy of the Olympians as the age of heroes faded and mortal societies grew more complex. The stories of Olympus transformed from accounts of direct divine intervention into frameworks for understanding the world, morality, and human behavior. The gods became symbols, their myths, allegories, illustrating universal truths about courage, wisdom, justice, and the consequences of human actions. Mortals no longer necessarily believed the gods would descend to intervene, yet the lessons embedded in these tales shaped philosophy, education, and culture for generations. The philosophers of ancient Greece, including Plato, Aristotle, and the Stoics, drew upon these myths to explore morality, ethics, and the nature of human existence. Stories of heroes, divine punishment, and godly wisdom were analyzed not merely as entertaining tales, but as reflections of human character and the principles that should guide life. Athena's wisdom became an allegory for rational thought and governance. Apollo's guidance symbolized harmony, balance, and enlightenment. Dionysus represented both the dangers of excess and the liberating potential of creativity and ecstasy. Through these reinterpretations, myths of Olympus became tools for understanding the human psyche, society, and the natural order. Education in ancient Greece incorporated these stories to teach virtue, courage, and ethical conduct. Children learned the tales of Heracles, Perseus, and Odysseus, internalizing lessons of perseverance, ingenuity, and moral judgment. The Olympians' narratives served as models of human aspiration and divine influence, guiding behavior through both admiration and caution. Heroes exemplified the heights mortals could achieve, while the fates of arrogant or impious figures demonstrated the consequences of moral failure. Art and literature also immortalized the gods, shaping culture across the Mediterranean and beyond. Sculptors, painters, and poets captured the Olympians' forms and stories, embedding their ideals into temples, civic spaces, and homes. The Parthenon in Athens, with its intricate friezes depicting Athena's triumphs, or the countless statues of Zeus, Apollo, and Hermes, communicated the gods' enduring presence even as the belief in their physical interventions waned. Myths became cultural touchstones, inspiring creativity, civic pride, and reflection on human potential. Even as the Roman Empire rose, the legacy of the Olympians persisted. Roman culture adapted Greek myths, translating the gods into their own pantheon: Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, Mars, and Venus, but preserving the moral and philosophical lessons embedded in their stories. Greek myths became a universal language, a shared repository of human values, heroism, and divine morality, ensuring that the lessons of Olympus transcended time, geography, and culture. The Olympians' influence also extended into the natural and moral imagination. Mountains, rivers, the sea, and the sky were forever associated with divine power and narrative. Mortals interpreted the natural world as a reflection of divine order, learning to respect its cycles, dangers, and gifts. The ethical and moral dimensions of mythology provided a framework for governance, law, and social cohesion, demonstrating that Olympus was not merely a pantheon of powerful beings, but the foundation for human understanding of justice, balance, and virtue. Thus, Chapter 8 illustrates the final transformation of Olympus from active rulers of mortals' lives to enduring symbols of morality, culture, and philosophy. The myths no longer required literal belief in divine intervention to influence human thought. Instead, they became allegorical guides, teaching courage, wisdom, humility, and respect for the natural and moral order. The Olympians' legacy endured not just in stories, but in the very way humanity learned to think, govern, and aspire. The philosophical interpretations of Olympian myths reveal layers of meaning that extended far beyond the literal stories. Thinkers like Plato often treated the myths as allegories for human behavior and the pursuit of virtue. The tales of Achilles' rage, Odysseus' cunning, and Heracles' labors were seen as explorations of the human psyche, representations of passion, intellect, and perseverance. By studying these myths, philosophers taught that humans must strive to master their emotions, act with reason, and align themselves with moral principles, echoing the influence of the gods, even in a metaphorical sense. The gods themselves became archetypes, embodying qualities and ideals that humans could aspire to or caution against. Zeus represented authority, justice, and cosmic balance. Hera symbolized loyalty, vigilance, and the complexities of familial duty. Athena exemplified wisdom, strategy, and rational thought. Apollo embodied harmony, enlightenment, and foresight. Artemis personified independence, protection, and respect for nature. And Dionysus illustrated both liberation and the dangers of excess. These archetypes allowed humans to understand abstract concepts, virtue, justice, temperance, courage, through stories that were memorable, vivid, and emotionally resonant. The integration of these divine archetypes into ethics and culture transformed the role of the Olympians. Laws, governance, and civic practices were influenced by the ideals represented by the gods. Courts of justice invoked Athena's wisdom in decision making, while rituals honoring Demeter reinforced agricultural cycles and communal cooperation. Heroes' tales served as moral exemplars, illustrating how courage, intelligence, and integrity could overcome adversity, while hubris, greed, or disrespect for higher powers inevitably led to downfall. The Olympians' presence became a constant moral compass, guiding civilizations through narrative, ritual, and symbolism. Even in art and literature, the Olympians' influence persisted across centuries. Poets like Homer and Hesiod preserved the richness of their myths, while dramatists explored human conflict, morality, and divine influence through tragedy and comedy. Sculptors and painters captured their forms and attributes, creating visual archetypes that communicated values and ideals to generations of viewers. Through these cultural expressions, Olympus remained alive in human imagination, shaping aesthetic sensibilities, social norms, and intellectual pursuits long after belief in literal divine intervention waned. The Olympians' cultural influence also extended beyond Greece. As the Roman Empire adopted Greek myths, these divine archetypes became foundational to Roman identity, philosophy, and civic culture. Later, during the Renaissance, the revival of classical mythology inspired artists, writers, and thinkers across Europe. The Olympians' lessons, courage, wisdom, justice, and moral vigilance transcended time and geography, becoming integral to Western culture and education. Ultimately, the Olympians' enduring legacy is a testament to the power of myth. They shaped not only stories, but human understanding, morality, and imagination. They taught that courage, wisdom, and virtue were timeless ideals, that hubris and moral failure carried consequences, and that humans could aspire to greatness through intellect, morality, and perseverance. Even centuries after the gods were no longer believed in the literal sense, their influence continued to guide thought, culture, and ethical reasoning. Beyond their roles as archetypes, the Olympians became internal guides for human behavior. Ancient Greeks began to view the gods not only as external forces, but as symbolic reflections of human tendencies, virtues, and vices. For example, Ares, god of war, represented the destructive aspects of anger and aggression, warning humans of the dangers of unchecked violence. Conversely, Athena embodied strategy, wisdom, and disciplined action, teaching that intellect and planning could overcome brute force. By studying the gods and their interactions, mortals learned to navigate their own emotions, make ethical decisions, and cultivate personal excellence. The Olympians' influence also extended to ethical dilemmas and philosophical discourse. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle frequently referenced myth to explain moral and civic principles. The stories of divine punishment, like that of Sisyphus eternally rolling his boulder, or Icarus flying too close to the sun, served as cautionary tales, illustrating hubris, the consequences of ignoring natural laws, and the limits of human ambition. Similarly, tales of heroism, cleverness, and loyalty emphasize virtues such as courage, ingenuity, and adherence to justice. In this way, myths became living tools for ethical education, guiding not only children, but citizens and leaders, their personal and civic lives. The Olympians were also central to understanding the natural and cosmic order. The Greeks interpreted natural phenomena as expressions of divine will. Thunder and lightning were attributed to Zeus, the sea's tempests to Poseidon, and the cycles of life and agriculture to Demeter. This framework allowed mortals to comprehend and respect their environment, aligning their actions with natural and moral order. Rituals, sacrifices, and festivals were not only acts of devotion, but practical methods of social cohesion, reinforcing shared values, respect for life, and the understanding that human actions had consequences beyond the individual. Art, literature, and storytelling further reinforced these lessons. Sculptures of Zeus or Athena in civic spaces reminded citizens of ideals such as justice, courage, and wisdom. Plays and poems dramatized moral choices, divine rewards, and punishments, creating emotional resonance that etched ethical principles into memory. Even when the gods were no longer believed to intervene directly, their stories shaped thought, imagination, and behavior, ensuring that the lessons of Olympus were internalized by generations. The enduring legacy of the Olympians also lies in their integration into human consciousness as symbolic and moral reference points. They became metaphors for human psychology, societal norms, and ethical reasoning. Courage, wisdom, temperance, and justice were no longer abstract concepts. They were embodied in the deeds of gods and heroes, providing concrete examples for humans to follow. Conversely, hubris, arrogance, and moral failings were illustrated through divine punishment, reinforcing the importance of humility, self-awareness, and ethical conduct. Thus, the Olympians' transformation from active rulers to moral and cultural guides reflects the evolution of human understanding. The myths became less about fear or superstition and more about reflection, education, and aspiration. Mortals learned to see themselves mirrored in the gods, their strengths, weaknesses, and potential, and to act with wisdom, courage, and ethical integrity. Chapter 8, in its continuation, highlights the Olympians' ultimate role. They were no longer just deities to be worshipped or feared. They became eternal teachers, symbols of virtue, and guides for human thought. Their stories, once literal accounts of divine intervention, evolved into a rich tapestry of philosophy, morality, and culture, ensuring that Olympus would influence humanity long after the gods had ceased to walk openly among mortals. The Olympians' influence did not end with antiquity. As Greek culture spread through the Mediterranean and beyond, their myths were preserved, adapted, and reinterpreted across civilizations. During the Roman era, Greek deities were assimilated into Roman culture. Their names changed. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, Athena became Minerva, but their symbolic and moral significance remained intact. These stories continued to teach courage, wisdom, justice, and humility, influencing governance, civic ideals, and cultural practices throughout the Roman world. During the Renaissance, a renewed interest in classical learning brought the myths of Olympus back to prominence. Artists such as Michelangelo, Botticelli, and Raphael drew inspiration from Greek mythology, depicting gods, heroes, and epic narratives in sculpture, painting, and literature. The Olympians' stories were no longer seen purely as religious truths, but as rich sources of artistic, moral, and philosophical exploration. Poets, playwrights, and philosophers used these myths to examine human nature, morality, and the eternal struggle between virtue and vice. Even in modern times, the legacy of Olympus endures in literature, film, art, and psychology. Writers like James Joyce, Rick Riordan, and Madeline Miller have reimagined Greek myths, breathing life into the gods and heroes for new generations. The Olympians have become symbols in psychology and literature. Zeus represents authority, Athena represents wisdom, Apollo embodies reason and harmony, and Dionysus embodies creativity and chaos. Their stories continue to offer insight into human behavior, morality, and aspiration, illustrating universal truths across time and culture. The enduring power of Olympus lies not only in these symbolic and cultural forms, but in the moral and philosophical lessons embedded in their stories. Hubris, courage, loyalty, wisdom, and virtue remain central themes, teaching that human action is significant and that moral and ethical integrity are timeless principles. Even without literal belief in divine intervention, the Olympians guide thought, inspire creativity, and serve as a moral compass, connecting modern humanity with the ancient world. Thus, Chapter 8 concludes with the understanding that the Olympians' influence is eternal, from ancient temples to Renaissance art, from classical literature to modern storytelling. Their presence is woven into the very fabric of human culture. The gods of Olympus, once active participants in mortal affairs, evolved into enduring symbols of virtue, vice, courage, wisdom, and moral guidance. Their myths, once literal explanations for natural phenomena and human destiny, became timeless allegories, ensuring that the lessons of Olympus continue to resonate across centuries and civilizations. In the end, Olympus is not just a realm of gods, it is a mirror of humanity itself. Through their stories, the Olympians teach us who we are, what we can aspire to, and the consequences of our choices. They remain eternal teachers, inspiring imagination, guiding morality, and shaping civilization long after the age of heroes has passed. Chapter 9: Olympus Through the Ages. The influence of Greek mythology on world culture. The myths of Olympus did not remain confined to ancient Greece. Their influence radiated across civilizations, inspiring art, literature, philosophy, and moral thought for millennia. As Greek culture spread through trade, conquest, and colonization, the stories of Zeus, Hera, Athena, and the other Olympians became part of a shared human heritage, transcending borders, languages, and eras. During the Roman Empire, Greek myths were adapted and integrated into Roman religion and civic life. The Olympians were renamed. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, and so forth. But their symbolic and moral significance remained. Roman writers like Ovid, through works such as the Metamorphoses, preserved and expanded these myths, ensuring their survival for future generations. The Roman adoption of Greek mythology also influenced law, politics, and ethics. Stories of heroism, justice, and divine retribution were woven into civic education, encouraging citizens to emulate virtues such as courage, loyalty, and wisdom. As the Roman Empire waned, the myths of Olympus continued to influence medieval Europe, often filtered through Christian allegory. Classical texts were preserved in monasteries, where scholars and scribes copied and studied them. Though belief in the literal power of the gods diminished, the moral lessons, archetypes, and narrative structures remained influential. Heroes, divine justice, and moral consequences became foundational elements in storytelling, shaping legends, epics, and morality plays that taught virtue, courage, and ethical conduct. During the Renaissance, the revival of classical knowledge reintroduced Greek mythology in its full richness. Artists, architects, and writers drew upon the imagery and symbolism of Olympus, blending it with contemporary religious, cultural, and philosophical ideas. Sculptors, like Michelangelo, depicted Zeus and other gods with grandeur, while painters, such as Botticelli, illustrated mythological narratives with vibrant emotion and moral depth. These works celebrated human potential, creativity, and the moral lessons embedded in myth, demonstrating that the Olympians' influence had shifted from divine rulers to enduring symbols of human aspiration. Literature also flourished under the influence of Greek myths. Writers and poets across Europe drew inspiration from Olympus to explore human nature, morality, and the consequences of hubris and virtue. From epic poetry to drama, the Olympians became universal symbols, metaphors for leadership, wisdom, temptation, courage, and the moral struggles inherent in human life. Even as belief in literal gods faded, their stories continued to shape thought, culture, and artistic expression. In modern times, the Olympians remain central to storytelling, psychology, and education. Their myths are retold in novels, films, comics, and video games, captivating audiences while preserving the moral and cultural lessons of ancient Greece. Archetypes such as the wise strategist, Athena, the heroic warrior, Heracles, the vengeful god, Hera, and the cunning trickster, Hermes, continue to resonate, providing insight into human behavior and the timeless struggle between virtue and vice. Furthermore, the Olympians' legacy extends into psychology and philosophy. Carl Jung and other thinkers recognized archetypal patterns in the gods, understanding them as reflections of human consciousness, morality, and the collective unconscious. These archetypes help humans navigate life's challenges, understand their desires, fears, and ambitions, and strive towards self-mastery and ethical living. Thus, Chapter 9 begins by illustrating that the Olympians' influence is truly global and timeless. Their stories have guided civilizations, inspired art and literature, shaped ethical thought, and provided enduring moral lessons. From antiquity to the modern era, Olympus continues to serve as both a mirror and a guide, reflecting human nature while teaching courage, wisdom, justice, and humility. Even during the Middle Ages, when belief in literal Greek gods had largely faded in Europe, the stories of Olympus continued to influence moral thought, literature, and education. Scholars preserved Greek texts in monasteries and libraries, studying myths alongside philosophy, history, and theology. Writers drew on the themes of heroism, divine justice, and moral consequence to craft allegories and morality tales. Figures such as King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table bear traces of Olympian influence, quests, trials, divine guidance, and moral tests echoing the journeys of heroes like Perseus, Odysseus, and Heracles. In this way, the spirit of Olympus lived on through stories that taught virtue, courage, and ethical decision making. The Renaissance marked a rebirth of classical knowledge, and with it, a revival of the Olympians' imagery and stories. Artists depicted mythological scenes in sculpture, painting, and literature, merging ancient Greek ideals with contemporary humanist thought. Raphael's Parnassus and Botticelli's Birth of Venus celebrated the gods and heroes not as objects of worship, but as symbols of human potential, creativity, and moral insight. Writers and poets used these myths to explore human nature and ethics, turning Olympus into a canvas for philosophical reflection. The gods became metaphors for human qualities, moral challenges, and the pursuit of virtue. In literature, Greek mythology provided a foundation for storytelling, allegory, and the exploration of morality. Writers like Dante Alighieri, though primarily influenced by Christian thought, incorporated classical references to heroism and divine order, showing the continued resonance of Greek myths in European culture. Later, during the Enlightenment, philosophers and writers drew upon Olympus to explore reason, ethics, and human potential, using the gods as symbols to question authority, virtue, and the balance between human ambition and moral law. The modern era has seen Greek mythology, and particularly the Olympians, penetrate popular culture in unprecedented ways. Novels such as Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series bring the gods and heroes into contemporary settings, teaching new generations about courage, loyalty, and moral choice. Films, television series, and video games continue to reinterpret the stories of Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, and the others, keeping their lessons alive while making them accessible and engaging. Even comic books, theater, and music draw inspiration from the Olympians, proving that these myths remain relevant and compelling. The Olympians' influence also extends into psychology and philosophy, where their archetypal roles help humans understand universal aspects of the psyche. Zeus embodies authority and justice. Athena represents wisdom and strategy. Apollo symbolizes harmony and enlightenment, and Dionysus reflects creativity, chaos, and emotional liberation. Through these archetypes, the stories of Olympus continue to teach self-awareness, moral responsibility, and the importance of balancing intellect, emotion, and ethical conduct. In education, Greek mythology remains a cornerstone for teaching literature, ethics, and history. Students encounter the Olympians not merely as figures from ancient stories, but as embodiments of universal truths about human nature, ambition, and morality. The trials, successes, and failures of gods and heroes become lessons in courage, intelligence, humility, and perseverance. Thus, Chapter 9 demonstrates that the influence of Olympus has never waned, from medieval allegories to Renaissance art, from modern novels and films to psychological archetypes. The gods and heroes of ancient Greece continue to shape human thought, culture, and moral understanding. Olympus has evolved from a literal pantheon to a symbolic, philosophical, and cultural framework, teaching timeless lessons that resonate across eras, civilizations, and societies. The influence of Olympus extends far beyond Europe and the Mediterranean. Greek myths traveled along trade routes, through conquests, and via translation, influencing cultures across the Middle East, Asia, and even the Americas during the Age of Exploration. The archetypal qualities of the Olympians, wisdom, courage, justice, creativity, and even destructive power, resonated universally because they reflect aspects of the human experience shared across cultures. Stories of heroes overcoming divine or natural obstacles, of moral choices with eternal consequences, and of ambition tempered by humility, found parallels in local myths and legends. In modern ethics and psychology, the Olympians provide a framework for understanding human behavior and moral development. Archetypal psychology, influenced by thinkers like Carl Jung, sees gods like Athena, Apollo, and Dionysus as symbols of human potential and challenge. Athena represents strategic intelligence and the ethical use of knowledge. Apollo embodies harmony, rationality, and creative inspiration. Dionysus reflects the tension between freedom, emotion, and chaos. Even Zeus, with his authority and judgment, illustrates the human struggle with power, responsibility, and justice. By internalizing these archetypes, humans gain tools to analyze character, make ethical choices, and understand the interplay between emotion, reason, and morality. Storytelling across the modern world continues to draw upon Olympian motifs. Epic narratives, whether in novels, films, video games, or theater, often mirror the challenges faced by Greek heroes: a quest, divine or supernatural guidance, moral tests, and the consequences of hubris or virtue. The narrative structures pioneered by Greek mythology, heroes' journeys, trials of courage, divine intervention, and moral resolution remain the backbone of contemporary storytelling. From blockbuster films like Clash of the Titans to literary retellings of Homer's epics, the Olympians' lessons are continually reimagined for new audiences, proving the timelessness of these myths. Olympian influence is also evident in education and cultural discourse. The myths are taught not only for their entertainment value, but as tools to discuss ethics, civic responsibility, leadership, and human nature. The trials of Heracles, Odysseus, and Perseus become case studies in perseverance, intelligence, and moral judgment. The punishments of Tantalus, Sisyphus, and Icarus illustrate the consequences of arrogance, greed, and lack of foresight. Through these stories, students and thinkers are encouraged to explore universal human questions. How should one act with courage? How does wisdom guide decision making? What are the consequences of ignoring moral and ethical laws? In art and symbolism, the Olympians continue to inspire. Sculptors, painters, and digital artists depict the gods and heroes in modern forms, often highlighting qualities that remain relevant today: leadership, courage, justice, creativity, and resilience. The archetypal influence of the Olympians has also reached psychology, literature, and even leadership studies, shaping how humans think about morality, strategy, and the pursuit of excellence. Ultimately, the Olympians' presence in global culture demonstrates that their stories are not bound by time, geography, or belief. They have evolved from literal gods walking among mortals to universal symbols of human potential, morality, and ethical reflection. They teach that virtue and vice are ever present, that courage and intelligence are essential, and that wisdom, humility, and moral awareness are the true hallmarks of greatness. Chapter 9, therefore, shows that Olympus is not confined to ancient Greece. It is a living, evolving influence on human thought, culture, morality, and imagination worldwide. The gods may no longer descend from Mount Olympus, but their lessons, stories, and archetypal power remain, guiding humanity in understanding itself and navigating the challenges of life across centuries and civilizations. Chapter 10, Olympus as an eternal teacher. The timeless lessons of the Greek gods. As we reach the culmination of our journey through Greek mythology, it becomes clear that the gods of Olympus are far more than figures of ancient stories. They are eternal teachers, symbols of human nature, and guides for moral, intellectual, and spiritual growth. From Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, to Hermes, the clever messenger, each deity embodies qualities, virtues, and warnings that continue to resonate with humanity today. The first lesson Olympus teaches is that virtue requires both action and wisdom. Heroes, like Heracles and Odysseus, achieved greatness not simply through strength or cunning, but through perseverance, intelligence, and ethical decision making. Likewise, the gods themselves demonstrated the consequences of virtue and vice. Athena's wisdom rewarded the just, while Ares' unchecked aggression often led to destruction. From these stories, humans learn that courage, intelligence, and morality must work together to create meaningful, lasting achievement. Another enduring lesson is the importance of humility and respect for forces greater than oneself. Many myths warn against hubris, the dangerous arrogance of mortals who ignore moral, ethical, or natural laws. Tantalus, Icarus, and Niobe serve as reminders that pride, impatience, or disrespect can bring ruin. Olympus teaches that understanding one's place in the world, respecting natural order, and approaching life with humility are not signs of weakness, but essential qualities for growth, balance, and wisdom. The gods also demonstrate the complexity of morality and human nature. They are not perfect, nor are they simple models of goodness. Zeus's authority is tempered by judgment, Hera's loyalty mixes with jealousy, and Dionysus's creativity is intertwined with chaos. These complexities reflect human life. Morality is rarely black and white, and ethical decisions require discernment, reflection, and courage. By observing the gods, humans learn to navigate their own ethical dilemmas, balancing ambition, compassion, intelligence, and restraint. Olympus also emphasizes the interconnectedness of life, society, and culture. The gods' influence was never limited to individual actions. It extended to cities, civilizations, laws, and cultural norms. Festivals, rituals, and stories instilled shared values, reinforced ethical behavior, and encouraged cooperation. In modern terms, the Olympians remind humanity that moral action is not solely personal, but communal, affecting societies, relationships, and future generations. Creativity, innovation, and inspiration are also central to Olympus's teachings. Apollo's music and poetry, Athena's strategy and craftsmanship, and Dionysus's transformative energy all illustrate that human potential is boundless when guided by wisdom, courage, and moral awareness. The gods teach that intellectual, artistic, and spiritual development are essential aspects of human life, and that the pursuit of excellence in any field should be accompanied by ethical consideration and respect for the natural and social world. Finally, Olympus endures as a mirror for self reflection. Each god, each story, each hero's journey is an invitation to examine one's own character, choices, and aspirations. The Olympians remind humans that life is a series of challenges, decisions, and moral tests, and that understanding oneself, striving for virtue, and learning from mistakes are the truest paths to growth and fulfillment. Chapter 10, in its reflection, reveals that Greek mythology is far more than ancient entertainment. It is a profound guide to human life. The stories of Olympus offer timeless lessons: courage, wisdom, humility, morality, creativity, and perseverance. They teach that human potential is vast, but it must be tempered with ethical awareness and respect for forces greater than oneself. They remind us that our actions, choices, and values echo beyond our own lives, shaping societies, cultures, and civilizations. In the end, Olympus is eternal, not because of the literal power of the gods, but because their stories, lessons, and archetypes continue to teach humanity about who we are, who we can become, and how we might live with courage, wisdom, and integrity. The Greek gods endure as teachers, guides, and mirrors, forever illuminating the path of human growth, morality, and imagination. The Olympians' teachings are not confined to history, literature, or philosophy. They remain profoundly relevant to modern life. In a world filled with complexity, uncertainty, and moral ambiguity, the stories of Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and the other gods offer timeless guidance. They remind us that life is a series of challenges and that courage, wisdom, and ethical awareness are essential tools for navigating them. Zeus, as the king of gods, teaches leadership and responsibility. His power is tempered by justice and the need for careful judgment. In modern terms, Zeus reminds us that authority and influence must be exercised wisely, with consideration for the greater good and the well-being of others. Leadership is not merely about strength or control, but about fairness, vision, and accountability. Athena embodies strategy, intelligence, and rational action. She teaches that challenges are best met with preparation, knowledge, and thoughtful planning. Whether in business, education, or personal development, Athena's lessons emphasize that wisdom and skill must guide action, and that insight often outweighs raw force in achieving lasting success. Apollo, god of light, music, and prophecy, illustrates the power of creativity, harmony, and foresight. He reminds humanity that beauty, art, and intellectual pursuits are essential to a fulfilled life. Apollo also symbolizes clarity of thought and the pursuit of knowledge, encouraging humans to seek understanding and balance in all areas of life. Dionysus, the god of transformation and ecstasy, teaches the value of embracing emotion, creativity, and even chaos while respecting limits. He reminds us that personal growth often involves navigating unpredictability, exploring our passions, and reconciling freedom with responsibility. Dionysus encourages balance, showing that joy, creativity, and emotional expression are vital when tempered with wisdom and ethical awareness. The Olympians' stories also teach resilience. Heroes like Heracles endured immense trials, demonstrating perseverance, courage, and the ability to overcome adversity. His labors remind us that challenges are inevitable, but that determination, moral integrity, and intelligence allow us to triumph over obstacles. Similarly, the consequences faced by figures such as Icarus or Tantalus underscore the dangers of hubris, impatience, and disregard for natural and moral law, teaching lessons about humility, foresight, and self awareness. In relationships and community, the Olympians continue to guide human behavior. Myths involving love, loyalty, betrayal, and family, such as the stories of Hera, Aphrodite, and Hermes, illustrate the complexities of human interaction, the consequences of actions, and the importance of trust, empathy, and communication. Through these narratives, humans learn to navigate personal and social relationships with greater wisdom and ethical sensitivity. Moreover, the Olympians inspire imagination, creativity, and the pursuit of excellence. Artists, writers, educators, and thinkers continue to draw upon their stories to explore human potential, moral dilemmas, and the beauty of the world. Their myths encourage curiosity, innovation, and reflection, reminding humanity that intellectual and artistic endeavors are as essential to life as moral integrity and courage. Ultimately, the Olympians teach that life is a balance of virtue, intelligence, courage, and self awareness. Their stories are mirrors reflecting the human experience, our strengths, weaknesses, triumphs, and failures. They guide us in understanding ourselves, making ethical choices, and striving for personal and collective excellence. Chapter 10, therefore, solidifies the idea that Olympus is not just a mythic realm, but a living, enduring framework for human growth, morality, and imagination. The gods of Greek mythology continue to serve as eternal teachers, their lessons timeless, their influence universal, and their stories an unbroken thread connecting ancient wisdom with modern life. The lessons of Olympus are not merely abstract, they can be actively applied to daily life, helping humans navigate modern challenges with courage, wisdom, and moral clarity. Take, for example, decision making and leadership. In professional and personal contexts, Zeus teaches that authority must be exercised with fairness, foresight, and responsibility. Leaders who emulate his virtues recognize the consequences of their actions, balance power with justice, and inspire trust and loyalty in those around them. Problem solving and strategy are central lessons from Athena. Her guidance reminds us to approach challenges with preparation, knowledge, and thoughtful analysis. Whether planning a career move, solving a complex problem, or making an ethical choice, the wisdom of Athena encourages humans to rely on reason, experience, and careful observation rather than impulse or emotion alone. Apollo's teachings highlight the importance of creativity, knowledge, and foresight. Engaging in artistic expression, intellectual exploration, or innovation is not a luxury, but a human necessity. By cultivating beauty, clarity, and insight in our work and relationships, we honor the values that Olympus instilled in humanity. Dionysus, in contrast, reminds us of the necessity of balance between freedom and responsibility, emotion and reason. In modern life, where stress, uncertainty, and rapid change are constant, learning to channel emotions constructively, embrace creativity, and take calculated risks can lead to personal growth, innovation, and fulfillment. Yet, Dionysus also warns against excess and recklessness, reminding humans that freedom without ethical awareness can be destructive. The trials of heroes such as Heracles, Perseus, and Odysseus further illustrate the importance of resilience, perseverance, and ethical integrity. Life is full of challenges, setbacks, and moral dilemmas. By reflecting on their journeys, humans learn that enduring hardship with courage, maintaining moral integrity, and striving for personal excellence are timeless principles for success and fulfillment. Relationships, both personal and communal, also benefit from the lessons of Olympus. The myths involving love, loyalty, betrayal, and family dynamics teach empathy, responsibility, and communication. Understanding human complexity, acknowledging both virtues and flaws, is essential for building strong, meaningful connections. By observing the gods and their interactions, humans can navigate social and familial challenges with wisdom and care. In modern education and culture, the Olympians remain invaluable. Their stories are integrated into literature, philosophy, psychology, and even leadership training. They provide a framework for moral reflection, critical thinking, and the pursuit of excellence. By studying the myths, humans learn to understand themselves and others, make ethical choices, and cultivate both personal and societal growth. Ultimately, the Olympians serve as a mirror of humanity, reflecting both our potential and our limitations. They teach that life requires courage, intelligence, ethical awareness, and creativity. They remind us that hubris leads to downfall, that virtue is rewarded, and that growth comes through both struggle and reflection. Their lessons transcend time, culture, and circumstance, providing guidance as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. As we close this journey through the world of Greek mythology, we recognize that Olympus is more than a mountain or a pantheon of gods. It is a symbol of human aspiration, moral inquiry, and intellectual exploration. The stories of Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Dionysus, and all the Olympians endure because they reflect the eternal struggles, virtues, and potential of humanity. The gods of Olympus no longer walk among mortals, yet their presence is alive in thought, culture, and imagination. They continue to teach, inspire, and challenge us. They remind us to act with courage, think with wisdom, create with insight, and live with virtue. They are eternal guides, shaping how humans understand themselves and the world around them. Chapter 11: The Modern Olympus. How Greek Gods Inspire Today's World. Even though thousands of years have passed since the first myths of Olympus were told, the gods continue to inspire, guide, and challenge humanity. Their influence is visible in modern storytelling, popular culture, philosophy, psychology, leadership, and even everyday life. The stories of the gods remain relevant because the human experiences they explore, ambition, courage, morality, love, jealousy, creativity, and wisdom, are timeless. In literature, the Olympians appear as enduring symbols and archetypes. Writers like Rick Riordan, Madeline Miller, and others have reimagined Greek myths, introducing new generations to Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and the other gods. These retellings are not mere entertainment. They provide moral and psychological lessons, showing readers how to navigate personal challenges, relationships, and ethical dilemmas. Even in genres far removed from classical mythology, the narrative structures, heroic journeys, and moral conflicts of the Olympians underpin storytelling. Conventions worldwide, film and television have also embraced Olympus as a source of inspiration. From epic adaptations like Clash of the Titans and Hercules to animated features and series, the gods' stories continue to captivate audiences. Directors and writers explore timeless themes: the struggle between good and evil, the consequences of ambition, the power of wisdom, and the importance of courage. Through visual storytelling, the Olympians' lessons are translated into experiences that resonate emotionally and intellectually with modern viewers. In psychology, the Olympians serve as archetypes of human behavior. Carl Jung and other thinkers recognized that these mythic figures represent universal patterns within the human mind. Zeus embodies authority, leadership, and moral judgment. Athena represents strategic intelligence and ethical reasoning. Apollo symbolizes creativity, insight, and balance. Dionysus illustrates the tension between freedom, passion, and chaos. By understanding these archetypes, individuals can better navigate emotions, ambitions, and interpersonal relationships, using the stories of Olympus as a framework for self-awareness and personal growth. Leadership and ethics also benefit from Olympian lessons. Modern leaders, whether in politics, business, or social movements, can learn from Zeus's sense of responsibility, Athena's strategic thinking, and Apollo's pursuit of balance. The myths remind us that power carries moral obligations, that wisdom must guide action, and that ethical integrity is essential for lasting influence and respect. In education and creative pursuits, the Olympians continue to inspire curiosity, imagination, and intellectual exploration. Students learn not only history and literature, but also life lessons, resilience, through Heracles' trials, ingenuity through Odysseus's journeys, and humility through the consequences of hubris. Artists, writers, and innovators draw upon their stories to explore human nature, society, and ethical questions, keeping the Olympians alive in contemporary culture. Even in everyday life, the lessons of Olympus are applicable. Courage, perseverance, wisdom, humility, and ethical reflection are all qualities embodied by the gods and heroes. By studying their stories, humans learn to navigate modern challenges, career, decisions, relationships, moral dilemmas, and personal growth with insight and purpose. The Olympians provide a mirror of human potential, showing what we can achieve, warning us against excess and hubris, and inspiring us to strive for balance, integrity, and excellence. Chapter 11 thus demonstrates that Olympus is not a relic of the past. The gods and heroes of Greek mythology are active participants in the modern imagination, shaping thought, behavior, creativity, and ethical reasoning. Their stories endure because they reflect the eternal truths of human life, ambition and consequence, wisdom and folly, courage and fear, freedom and responsibility. The modern Olympus teaches that even in a world far removed from Mount Olympus itself, the lessons of the gods remain vital. They remind us to act with integrity, think with wisdom, embrace creativity, navigate emotion, and strive for virtue in all aspects of life. In this way, Olympus lives on, not as a place or pantheon, but as an enduring influence on the human spirit, imagination, and a moral consciousness. One of the clearest examples of Olympus's enduring influence is in popular culture. From blockbuster films to best-selling novels and video games, Greek mythology continues to captivate audiences around the world. Characters like Percy Jackson or films such as Wonder Woman and Clash of the Titans reimagine the gods and heroes, bringing their virtues, flaws, and moral lessons into contemporary contexts. Even superhero archetypes, heroes with extraordinary abilities, moral codes, and personal challenges, can trace their narrative roots back to the epic struggles of the Olympians. These modern reinterpretations allow audiences to engage with timeless lessons about courage, morality, and human potential in a language and format that feels immediate and relevant. In leadership and ethics, the Olympians provide powerful guidance. Zeus, as the ultimate authority figure, teaches that power without responsibility can be destructive, while leadership that balances authority with fairness fosters respect and stability. Athena's strategic intelligence encourages leaders to think ahead, weigh consequences, and act with wisdom rather than impulse. Apollo reminds leaders to cultivate clarity, harmony, and vision, while Dionysus emphasizes the need to balance discipline with creativity, freedom, and emotional intelligence. By studying the archetypes of the gods, modern leaders in business, politics, and community organizations gain insight into human motivation, ethical decision-making, and effective governance. The Olympians also inspire personal growth and resilience. Heracles' 12 labors demonstrate the value perseverance and courage in the face of overwhelming obstacles. Odysseus's long journey home teaches patience, ingenuity, and the ability to adapt to unexpected challenges. Even the failures of characters like Icarus and Tantalus serve as reminders to temper ambition with caution and humility. These stories encourage individuals to reflect on their own strengths and weaknesses, confront adversity with courage, and strive for continuous self improvement. In psychology and self development, the Olympians function as mirrors of the human psyche. Each god represents qualities we recognize in ourselves or aspire to cultivate. Athena's wisdom teaches critical thinking and rational problem solving. Apollo's light encourages clarity, creativity, and pursuit of knowledge. Dionysus's transformative energy reminds us to embrace emotion, passion, and change without losing ethical grounding. Zeus's authority challenges us to consider responsibility and justice in our personal and societal actions. By internalizing these archetypes, we develop a richer understanding of human nature, emotional intelligence, and moral reasoning. Education and storytelling remain central areas where Olympus thrives. Teachers and writers use Greek myths to illuminate complex moral and philosophical concepts. The heroes' journeys offer frameworks for understanding courage, loyalty, perseverance, and ethical decision making. By studying these narratives, students learn to navigate modern challenges with insight and reflection, while also connecting with universal human experiences that transcend time and culture. Finally, the Olympians inspire creativity, innovation, and imagination. From the arts to science, the gods' archetypes encourage humans to explore, question, and innovate. Apollo's illumination of knowledge, Athena's strategic brilliance, and Dionysus' transformative energy serve as models for approaching creative and intellectual endeavors. Whether designing a work of art, developing a new technology, or solving a complex societal problem, the lessons of Olympus guide humans to blend creativity with wisdom, imagination with ethical responsibility. Chapter 11 demonstrates that Olympus is far from a historical relic. It is a living influence in modern life. The gods' archetypes, stories, and lessons continue to shape culture, psychology, leadership, education, creativity, and personal development. They teach that life is a balance of courage, wisdom, morality, and resilience. They remind humanity that ambition must be tempered with humility, creativity must be guided by ethics, and challenges must be faced with perseverance and reflection. In the modern world, the lessons of Olympus remain as relevant as they were on Mount Olympus itself. They continue to inspire, guide, and challenge humanity to act with courage, think with wisdom, and live with integrity. The Olympians endure not only as mythic figures, but as eternal teachers, mirrors of human potential, and sources of inspiration that illuminate the path of growth, creativity, and ethical living. As we bring chapter 11 to a close, it becomes clear that the influence of Olympus transcends time, geography, and belief. The Greek gods and heroes, once worshipped as literal beings atop a distant mountain, now serve as eternal guides archetypes, and sources of inspiration. Their stories continue to illuminate human virtues and vices, teach moral and ethical lessons, and inspire creativity, resilience, and personal growth. In the modern world, the Olympians are everywhere in literature, films, video games, education, psychology, and even leadership. They remind us that courage, wisdom, creativity, and ethical action are not abstract ideals, but practical tools for navigating life. They challenge us to reflect on our choices, persevere through adversity, balance ambition with humility, and cultivate our fullest potential. Olympus, therefore, is not confined to the myths of ancient Greece. It is alive in the human imagination, thought, and culture. The lessons of the gods continue to guide, inspire, and challenge us, proving that the myths of Mount Olympus are timeless, universal, and eternally relevant. As we step back from the stories of Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Dionysus, and all the Olympians, we recognize that their true power lies not in supernatural might, but in the reflection of ourselves, the strengths, weaknesses, ambitions, and moral choices that define humanity. Their legacy endures because it teaches us who we are, who we can become, and how to live with courage, wisdom, integrity, and imagination. Chapter 11 closes, leaving us with the understanding that Olympus is eternal, not as a place, but as a living framework for human growth, morality, creativity, and inspiration. The Greek gods will continue to guide and challenge us for generations to come, a testament to the timelessness and enduring relevance of their stories. Chapter 12 The Legacy of Olympus. How the Greek gods shape our world. As we arrive at the final chapter of our journey through the stories of Olympus, it becomes evident that the influence of the Greek gods is far greater than mere mythology. From Mount Olympus to the modern world, their legacy has shaped literature, art, culture, philosophy, psychology, and even the way we understand ourselves. The gods are not simply characters of ancient tales. They are mirrors of humanity, eternal symbols of virtue, vice, ambition, and wisdom. The lessons of Olympus are universal. They teach that courage, intelligence, creativity, and ethical awareness are essential in every era. They remind us that hubris and recklessness lead to downfall, while perseverance, humility, and moral reflection foster growth and achievement. The stories of Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Dionysus, and the countless heroes and heroines who populate these myths continue to guide humanity in navigating personal challenges, relationships, and societal responsibilities. Olympus also endures as a cultural foundation. The narratives of the gods inspired ancient art, sculpture, theater, and literature, laying the groundwork for centuries of creative expression. Renaissance painters and sculptors revived these myths to explore human potential and morality. Moderns, novels, films, video games, and even comic books continue to draw upon the archetypes and themes of Olympus, demonstrating the timeless relevance of these stories in shaping imagination, culture, and storytelling conventions. In philosophy and psychology, the Olympians remain invaluable. Archetypal analysis reveals the gods as embodiments of human traits and challenges. Athena as strategy and wisdom, Apollo as creativity and clarity, Dionysus as transformation and passion, and Zeus as leadership and justice. By studying these archetypes, we gain insight into human behavior, moral reasoning, and the dynamics of personality, helping us understand ourselves and others more deeply. The Olympians also provide practical lessons for modern life. Leadership, creativity, ethical decision making, resilience, and personal growth are all informed by the stories of the gods. The trials of heroes like Heracles, Perseus, and Odysseus illustrate that perseverance, intelligence, and moral integrity are essential in overcoming obstacles. The consequences faced by figures like Icarus or Tantalus remind us to temper ambition with humility and foresight. Perhaps most importantly, the legacy of Olympus reminds us that stories are more than entertainment. They are mirrors, guides, and tools for human growth. The myths encourage reflection, inspire imagination, and teach timeless truths about human nature and society. They are a framework through which we understand morality, ambition, creativity, and the complexities of life itself. As we conclude this journey, we see that the Greek gods are not bound by time. They live on in our art, literature, education, psychology, leadership, and culture. They endure because the human experiences they reflect, love, ambition, courage, wisdom, temptation, and moral struggle, are eternal. Mount Olympus may be a mythic place, but the lessons of the gods are real, guiding humanity through the ages. Chapter 12, the final chapter, reminds us that the story of the Greek gods is far from over. It continues every day, in every choice, every act of creativity, every moment of courage, and every reflection on morality. The legacy of Olympus is eternal, and its teachings remain as vital today as they were thousands of years ago. As we reach the end of this epic journey through the stories of the Greek gods, it becomes clear that Olympus is more than a mythic place or a collection of ancient tales. From the primordial beginnings of the cosmos to the immortal halls of Mount Olympus, from the struggles of mortals and heroes to the enduring influence of the gods in modern culture, the myths of Greece have left an indelible mark on humanity. The stories we have explored over these chapters reveal a world rich with imagination, wisdom, and moral reflection. The Olympians, Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Dionysus, and all the others, are not just deities of power and magic, they are mirrors of human nature, embodying courage, ambition, wisdom, creativity, passion, and moral complexity. Through their victories and failures, humans learn timeless lessons about perseverance, humility, ethical responsibility, and the pursuit of greatness. Throughout history, the Olympians have inspired art, literature, philosophy, and culture. From ancient Greek temples and epic poetry to Renaissance masterpieces and modern novels, films, and games, their stories have transcended time and geography. Even today, their archetypes guide psychology, leadership, education, and personal growth, proving that the myths of Olympus are not relics of the past, but living frameworks for understanding life and human nature. The enduring appeal of Olympus lies in its universality. The gods' struggles, their triumphs, and their moral lessons speak to every generation because they reflect the eternal human experience. Courage, wisdom, creativity, humility, and resilience are not bound to any era. They are principles that guide us through our own trials, helping us navigate challenges, relationships, and ambitions. As you reflect on the journeys of heroes like Heracles, Perseus, and Odysseus, the wisdom of Athena, the creativity of Apollo, and the transformative energy of Dionysus, remember that these stories are more than entertainment. They are lessons, tools, and mirrors, teaching us how to act with integrity, think with clarity, and live with courage and imagination. They remind us that our choices matter, that our actions echo beyond ourselves, and that human potential is vast when guided by virtue and wisdom. The story of the Greek gods does not end here. It continues in every act of creativity, every ethical choice, every moment of reflection, and every human endeavor that seeks to balance courage, intelligence, and morality. Olympus is eternal, not as a physical place, but as an enduring influence on the human spirit. So, whether you encounter Zeus in a story, Athena in a moment of strategy, Apollo in a spark of inspiration, or Dionysus in the embrace of creativity, remember that the lessons of Olympus are alive within you. The gods have passed their wisdom through the ages, and it remains accessible to all who seek to learn, reflect, and grow. The myths of Greece are not just the history of gods, they are the history of humanity itself. They teach us who we are, who we can become, and how to live with courage, wisdom, and integrity. They inspire us to dream, to create, to persevere, and to reflect. And so, the story of Olympus continues, eternal, timeless, and ever present, a beacon guiding humanity through the ages, illuminating the path of imagination, morality, and human potential. And now, dear friend, as the tales of Olympus settle softly in your mind, let yourself relax. Feel the calm of the gods' timeless world wash over you. The wisdom of Athena, the courage of Heracles, the creativity of Apollo, and the gentle guidance of all the gods. Breathe deeply, letting each breath carry away any tension, and imagine yourself walking slowly through the golden halls of Mount Olympus, surrounded by light, peace, and quiet wonder. The stories you've heard tonight are now a gentle lullaby for your mind, a soft reflection of courage, wisdom, and imagination. Let your thoughts drift like clouds across the sky, light and free, as the world of the gods slowly fades into the calm of your dreams. There is nothing to do now but rest, breathe, and let the magic of Olympus carry you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Good night, dear friend. May your dreams be filled with stars, stories, and the gentle presence of Olympus. Thank you for watching The Calm Historian. I'm out.